Welcome to my channel. Spice and Fiction presents Danmachi, Child of Night, an original fanfiction series written by Spice and Fiction and narrated by AI. This story is a dark, alternate journey following Bell Cranel as he awakens a mysterious power that will put him at the center of calamity. Thank you for joining this adventure. Let's start the story. Prologue, the voice before dawn. I was before the first breath, before the word beginning meant anything at all. There was no edge to my being, no measure to my form. I did not move, for there was nowhere to go. I did not speak, for there was nothing yet to hear. I simply was. Stillness filled me, perfect and complete. Yet within that stillness, a sound arose, soft, uncertain, trembling like the flutter of a heart not yet born. I listened, and from listening, I became aware. From me came the first division, within and without, self and other. And in that gentle separation, I felt something impossible, longing. It began as warmth. Then it became brightness. Then it became defiance. The first light bloomed within my endless calm, desperate to prove itself apart from me. I did not stop it. I watched it grow, wild and unknowing, carving brilliance across my quiet form. Where it passed, I became shadow. Where it burned, I cooled the flame. Its song was loud and joyous, but even as it sang, it trembled, for without me, it could not see itself. And so I let it dance. I let it believe it had conquered me. In truth, I was within it all along. Every star that rose from my silence carried my reflection at its core. Every breath that stirred the new worlds came from the still air I left behind. Even the gods who came after, those bright, proud children of thunder and fire, bore fragments of me in their hearts. They called their passion creation, their fury life, their grief death. But I knew these were only echoes of my first calm. They rose, they named themselves, they crowned one another with dominion. Their wars painted color into the gray expanse. Their laughter made the heavens tremble. I watched it all without judgment. For I am not wrath. I am not mercy. I am what remains when both are spent. There were moments when even I was moved. When a mortal hand reached upward, trembling, seeking meaning in the darkness. When a mother whispered a name into her child's ear beneath the silent stars. When love bloomed even in despair. They called that spark hope. They never knew it was my gift. For hope can only exist in the shadow of fear. And fear can only exist where there is silence enough to feel alone. And I am that silence. In the still hours between dusk and dawn, I brush against their dreams. I whisper not in words, but in pause, in the hush between heartbeats. Some awaken weeping. Some awaken at peace. None remember my touch. That is the way it must be. To be seen is to be divided. I am whole only in mystery. The world spins. The children of light rise and fall, crown and crumble. Stars are born, die, and return to the dark that first shaped them. I have no need to intervene. I am patient. When all lights burn out, they return to me. When time grows old, it sinks back into my embrace. And when the final flame dims, I will close the circle once more, not as punishment, but as rest. For everything that struggles, everything that shines, everything that loves, it all began in stillness. And in stillness, it shall end. The stars will sleep again. The seas will fall silent. The last breath will return to the silence that dreamed it into being. And I will remain. Unseen. Unending. Listening. Chapter 1. The City of Gods and Heroes, Oreo. Bell Cranel sat in the carriage, dressed simply in a worn tunic and rough animal hide boots. The fabric itched against his skin, the leather creaked with each bump of the road. Outside, fields stretched endlessly, dotted with trees swaying in the wind. The driver flicked the reins, and the horses snorted, keeping their steady pace. Bell leaned his elbow on the window frame, feeling the breeze brush his hair. He had no armor, no pack, just a small satchel resting by his feet. The road wound forward through dust and sunlight, and he let the rhythm of travel fill the silence. Bell Cranel leaned out of the carriage window, eyes bright as the great walls of Oreo appeared on the horizon. The city rose like a promise, sunlight glinting off its towers and the distant white spire of Babel. His heart raced with every turn of the wheels. The noise of other travelers, the smell of dust and distant cooking fires, it all felt alive. He gripped the edge of the window, smiling despite the ache in his hands. "So that's Oreo," he whispered, barely believing it was real. The driver chuckled, urging the horses faster. Bell couldn't wait to arrive. Oreo, often called the Labyrinth City, is a vast metropolis built directly above the only known entrance to the dungeon, a living labyrinth that stretches deep beneath the earth. From a distance, Its most striking feature is Babel Tower, the enormous white spire that rises from the city's center, said to seal the dungeon's uppermost floor. Oreo serves as both fortress and frontier, a place where gods and mortals coexist, drawn together by the lure of adventure, wealth, and divine blessing. The city itself is divided into districts that spiral outward from Babel. Near the heart lie the grand avenues where the familious groups of adventurers bound to specific gods make their homes. Each familia operates under the power of a fauna, a divine blessing that records and strengthens the abilities of its members through experience gained in battle. Beyond the central districts are the markets, forges, and residential areas where the rhythm of mortal life continues between expeditions into the dungeon. The dungeon is Orario's lifeblood and its greatest danger. From its depths come the magic stones that fuel the city's economy and the materials used by smiths and alchemists. But the same tunnels also spawn countless monsters, making every descent a gamble between glory and death. Orario's gods descended from the heavens to live among humans, relinquishing most of their power so they could share in mortal struggles. Some offer guidance, others chase amusement, and a few seek influence through their familiar's fame. Together, they make Oreo a city of competition and miracle, where ambition burns alongside faith. To outsiders, Oreo is a beacon, a place where anyone might rise from obscurity to legend. Yet to those who live within its walls, it is simply home, loud, dangerous, dazzling, and alive. The carriage rolled to a stop before the massive gates of Oreo. Bell Cranel leapt out before the wheels had settled, eyes wide with wonder. The guards startled, halberds crossing in front of him. "Easy there, kid," one said, trying not to laugh. "You knew? You're bouncing like you've never seen a wall before." Bell grinned, barely standing still, his boots kicking up dust. "I am new. But this is Orario, the home of legends and myths," he said, chest swelling with pride. The guards exchanged amused looks, lowering their weapons. "Well," one chuckled, "let's hope you survive long enough to join them." Once the guards waved him through, Bell Cranel dashed into Oreo like a child set loose in a dream. The streets were alive with color and noise, vendors calling out their wares, the scent of grilled meat and spices drifting through the air. He stopped at every corner, marveling at shining weapons displayed in shop windows and the glittering stones sold by smiling merchants. Veterans in gleaming armor passed by, their cloaks fluttering like banners of glory, and Bell couldn't help but stare in admiration. His heart pounded with excitement. Every sound, every sight whispered the same thing: this is where heroes begin. Bell Cranel stopped in the middle of a busy street, turning slowly as people rushed around him. The thrill of arrival had faded into confusion. Stalls lined every corner, streets branched in every direction, and adventurers moved with clear purpose while he stood uncertain. He scratched the back of his head, glancing from one signboard to another: guild, inn, equipment shop, each one pulling his thoughts a different way. His coin pouch felt light at his side. "Where do I even start?" he muttered, half laughing at himself. The city buzzed on without answer, leaving him standing there, puzzled but still smiling. While lost in thought, Bell Cranel was approached by three rough-looking men lounging near an alley. "Hey, kid," one said with a grin, "you look new. What are you after?" Bell smiled, eager to talk. "I'm looking to become an adventurer. Maybe join a familia." The men exchanged quick glances. "Well, you're in luck," the tallest said smoothly. "We can get you in our gods taking recruits. Just a small offering first, something valuable. You know how it works." Bell blinked, confused. "An offering?" The men stepped closer, their smiles widening. "Yeah, kid. Hand it over, and we'll make you a hero." Bell stumbled back as the men closed in, their hands already reaching for his pouch. Before they could grab him, a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Enough." All three froze as two young women approached, each carrying baskets of groceries. One smiled kindly, silver hair brushing her shoulder sear. The other, with cold blue eyes, set her basket down. "Ryu Lion. Pick on someone else," Ryu warned, her glare enough to send the men running. Sear sighed, turning to Bell. "You really shouldn't talk to strangers, you know." Bell rubbed his neck, embarrassed but grateful. "Guess. Lesson learned," he muttered sheepishly. Catching his breath, Bell bowed awkwardly to his rescuers. "Thank you. I'm Bell Cranel. I just arrived in Oreo," he said, still flustered. Sear laughed softly, balancing her basket on one hip. "I'm Sear, and this is Ryu. We work at a place called the Hostess of Fertility." Ryu gave a polite nod, her tone calm but firm. "It's a tavern, not far from here. Safer than standing in the street." Sear smiled warmly. "You should come by." You look like you could use a meal and a bit of advice. Belle's face lit up. Really? I'd love that. As they walked through the crowded streets, Seer glanced at Belle with curiosity. So, Belle, where are you from? She asked. A small village far north, he answered, smiling shyly. Nothing special, really. She tilted her head. And what brings you all the way to Oreo? Belle's eyes brightened. To become an adventurer. I've always wanted to see heroes for myself, maybe even become one someday. Seer chuckled softly. That's a big dream. Do you have a plan? Belle rubbed his neck, embarrassed. Not yet. I thought I'd figure it out once I got here. Ryu remained silent, listening quietly beside them. Belle followed Seer and Ryu into the warm, bustling tavern. The smell of food and laughter filled the air as Seer guided him to a small table. Sit here, she said with a cheerful smile before disappearing into the kitchen. Moments later, she returned with a steaming plate of stew and bread. On the house, she said kindly. Belle's stomach growled, and he thanked her, digging in gratefully. Ryu stood nearby, arms crossed, her calm gaze fixed on him. You said you just arrived, she said. Do you know what to do next? Belle paused mid-bite, shaking his head slightly. Ryu sighed, her tone firm but not unkind. You came to Oreo with no plan, no familia, and no idea how this city works. That's reckless, even for an adventurer. Belle lowered his head, embarrassed. I just wanted to start somewhere, he mumbled. Seer sat beside him, setting down a cup of tea. Don't be too hard on him, she said gently, taking Belle's hand in hers. Everyone starts somewhere, right? But Ryu's right, you should look for a familia first. Belle glanced up, surprised by her warmth. Seer smiled encouragingly. Find someone who believes in you. That's step one. Belle finished the last bite of his meal, warmth spreading through him that wasn't just from the food. He glanced at Seer, still holding his hand, and felt his face flush deep red. Thank you, both of you, he stammered, bowing awkwardly. Ryu nodded, her expression softening a little. Be careful out there, she said. Seer laughed lightly. Go find your familia, Belle. I'll be cheering for you. Her fingers gave his hand one last squeeze before letting go. Heart racing, Belle hurried out of the tavern and onto the busy street, determined and smiling. The search for his dream had begun. Belle ran through the crowded streets, weaving between merchants and adventurers until he spotted the clang of hammer on metal echoing from a nearby forge. Wiping sweat from his brow, he hurried inside, greeted by the heat and smell of burning iron. A burly blacksmith looked up from his anvil, eyebrows raised. You lost, kid. Belle shook his head quickly. No, sir. I'm looking to join a familia. Do you know if the Hephaestus familia is accepting? The blacksmith chuckled, setting his hammer down. Hephaestus, huh? Not likely. But you've got guts, I'll give you that. Belle smiled sheepishly, still hopeful. Belle's excitement faded fast when the blacksmith laughed and waved him off. Sorry, kid. We're not taking rookies. Embarrassed, but undeterred, Belle hurried back into the crowded streets of Oreo. He stopped every adventurer he could find, men in armor, women in cloaks, anyone who looked important. Excuse me, are you accepting new members? Can I join your familia? Most ignored him. A few just laughed or shook their heads. Sweat ran down his face as he kept running, hope flickering but not dying. The city buzzed around him, bright and loud, yet Belle felt strangely small as he kept searching. Belle slowed his pace when a small potion shop caught his eye, tucked between larger buildings and glowing faintly with blue light. He pushed the door open, the bell above it jingling softly. Shelves lined the walls, filled with bottles that shimmered like captured stars. Behind the counter stood an old man with sharp eyes. What do you need, boy? He asked. Belle caught his breath. I'm looking for a familia to join. Are you, by any chance, part of one? The man chuckled, shaking his head. I sell potions, not dreams. Try elsewhere. Belle bowed politely and stepped back outside, sighing. Out of breath and desperate, Belle ran up to a pair of city guards standing near the gate. Excuse me, do you know if your familia is accepting new members? He asked eagerly. The guards looked at each other, then burst out laughing. One clapped him on the shoulder, nearly knocking him over. Us? We're not adventurers, kid. Tell you what, we'll let you join after you've eaten 10 sacks of rice. The other chuckled. Maybe then you'll have the muscle for guard duty. Belle laughed weakly with them, cheeks red with embarrassment. Belle trudged through the streets, his head low, the laughter of the guards still echoing in his ears. The excitement that had carried him through the city was gone, replaced by quiet embarrassment. When the familiar sign of the hostess of fertility came into view, he hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The warm scent of food greeted him, along with Seer's cheerful voice. Belle, you're back, she said, hurrying over. Ryu looked up from behind the counter, her calm eyes softening. "Rough day?" she asked. Bell nodded slowly, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, just a little." Bell sat at the same corner table as before, staring down at an untouched bowl of stew. The tavern buzzed with laughter and chatter, but it all felt distant. His shoulders slumped, fingers tracing circles on the wooden surface. Around him, adventurers spoke proudly of their battles and new familiar contracts. He sighed quietly, the sound lost in the noise. Seer passed by, setting a fresh drink beside him without a word, her smile gentle. Ryu watched from behind the counter, polishing a glass. Bell forced a small grin. "Guess today's mission failed," he muttered, voice soft but still hopeful. While Bell sat quietly at his table, the floorboards creaked under heavy steps. Mamma Mia loomed beside him, arms crossed, her sharp gaze studying his slouched posture. "What's with the sad face, boy?" she asked, her voice rough but not unkind. Bell looked up, startled, then sighed. "I tried all day to find a familia, but everyone turned me down. Some even laughed." He managed a weak smile. "Guess I wasn't ready after all." Mamma Mia huffed, pulling out the chair across from him. "Or maybe you just haven't knocked on the right door yet," she said. "Eat. Think. Then try again." Bell stared at his half-empty cup, lost in thought. The idea of giving up flickered in his mind, but he quickly pushed it away. Mamma Mia watched him quietly, then leaned on the table. "Tell me something. Kid, have you even gone to the guild yet?" she asked. Bell blinked, looking up in confusion. "The guild?" She raised an eyebrow. "Where else would a newbie start? They'll tell you who's recruiting if you stop sulking long enough to ask." Bell straightened, eyes widening with renewed energy. I didn't think of that." Mamma Mia smirked. "Didn't think so? Now move, rookie." Bell jumped to his feet, so fast his chair nearly toppled. "Thank you, Mamma Mia," he said, bowing quickly. She waved him off with a gruff snort, though a small smile tugged at her lips. Yeah, go before I change my mind." Without another word, Bell sprinted out of the tavern, weaving through the crowded streets with a burst of energy he hadn't felt all day. The city's noise filled his ears, the clatter of boots, the shouts of merchants, but all he could think about was the guild hall. For the first time since morning, hope burned bright again. Bell stopped at the grand entrance of the guild hall, his chest rising and falling with anticipation. The tall wooden doors gleamed in the afternoon light, carved with symbols of gods and heroes. He took a deep breath, gripping the handle before pushing it open. The hum of voices, the shuffle of papers, and the faint scent of parchment and ink greeted him. Rows of counters stretched across the hall, bustling with adventurers and officials. Bell stood frozen for a moment, eyes wide, taking it all in. Excitement swelled in his chest. This was the heart of Oreo, and he'd finally arrived. Bell wandered through the busy guild hall, unsure where to begin. Adventurers brushed past him, chatting loudly about quests and bounties. Gathering his courage, he approached a group near the counter. Excuse me, what should I do first?" he asked politely. They barely glanced his way. One snickered, another muttered, "Newbie." Embarrassed, Bell stepped back, eyes dropping to the floor. Just then, a warm voice called out, "You there, white hair? Over here." He turned to see a half-elf woman smiling gently behind a desk. "I'm Ina Tool," she said kindly. "You look new. Let's get you started properly, shall we?" Bell hurried to Ina's desk, relief flooding his face. "I'm Bell Cranel," he said, straightening his posture. "I just arrived in Oreo, and I want to be an adventurer." His voice rang louder than he meant, echoing across the hall. The chatter stopped. Dozens of heads turned. For a moment, there was silence, then laughter erupted from every corner. "Another rookie dreamer," someone shouted. "Good luck surviving a day, kid." Another jeered. Bell's face burned red, but he clenched his fists, refusing to shrink. Ina sighed softly, smiling despite the noise. "All right, Bell Cranel," she said. "Let's start from the beginning." Ina guided Bell to a quieter corner of the guild hall, handing him a stack of papers. "First, the basics," she began, her tone patient but firm. "All adventurers must register here, report their earnings, and follow the guild's safety regulations. Never enter the dungeon without proper equipment or training. We also track injuries and deaths. It's not a game, Bell." He nodded quickly, hanging on every word. After a pause, Ina looked up from her notes. "Have you joined a familia yet?" she asked. Bell shook his head. "Not yet. I've been trying all day." Ina smiled gently. "Then we'll fix that." Ina reached into a drawer and pulled out a rolled parchment, sealing it with the guild's mark before handing it to Bell. "This is a list of active familias currently accepting members," she explained. Bell unrolled it carefully, eyes widening at the names written in elegant script: Loki, Apollo, Ares, Dionysus, Hermes, Osiris, Vanir, Venus, and dozens more he didn't recognize. Each name carried a faint sense of power and mystery. Follow the addresses listed, Ina said. You'll have to visit them yourself and apply in person. Bell nodded eagerly, clutching the parchment like a treasure. Thank you, Miss Ina. I'll start right away. Bell burst out of the guild hall, parchment in hand, the names of great familiars flashing through his mind. His heart raced as he sprinted through the streets, dodging carts and pedestrians until the towering walls of the Twilight Manor came into view. The home of the Loki familia stood majestic under the afternoon sun. But when he reached the front gate, his excitement faltered. A massive line of hopeful adventurers stretched down the street, wrapping around the block. Dozens waited, chatting nervously or polishing weapons. Bell blinked in disbelief, panting. That many people. Just to join, he murmured, stunned. Bell stepped out of the crowd at the Twilight Manor, sighing as he glanced down at the parchment again. His eyes landed on the next name, Apollo Familia. All right, maybe this one, he said to himself and set off running through the city once more. The Apollo mansion gleamed with golden banners and loud music echoing from inside. Bell straightened his tunic and approached the gate with a hopeful smile. Before he could even speak, a guard waved him off. No more applicants today. Bell blinked. The gate slammed shut. He stood there awkwardly, shoulders slumping. Another no. Bell unfolded the parchment again, tracing his finger down the list until he stopped at Ares Familia. Okay, maybe a war god will take me, he muttered, trying to sound confident. He hurried through the bustling streets until he reached a large, red-bricked barracks draped in crimson banners. The sound of shouting soldiers and clashing weapons filled the air. Taking a deep breath, Bell approached the gate. Excuse me, I'd like to join the Ares Familia. A guard with a scarred face looked him over once, then barked a laugh. You? Go home, rookie. The gate shut firmly. Bell sighed deeply. Bell spent the entire day racing across Oreo, visiting every familia on the parchment. From grand mansions to tiny guild houses, the answer was always the same: a polite refusal, a laugh, or a door closed in his face. By the time he reached the last name, his legs ached and his throat was dry. The streets had grown quiet, lanterns flickering to life as night settled over the city. Bell stood at a crossroads, parchment crumpled in his hand, its ink smudged from sweat and dust. He exhaled slowly, staring up at the dark sky. Not one, he whispered. Not a single one. Bell trudged through the dimly lit streets, the glow of tavern signs guiding his weary steps. The crumpled parchment hung loosely from his hand, smudged and torn. When the familiar warmth of the hostess of fertility came into view, he hesitated before pushing the door open. Laughter and the smell of food spilled out, a sharp contrast to his mood. Seer noticed him first, her smile fading. Bell, she called softly. Ryu looked up from behind the counter, concern flickering in her eyes. Bell managed a small, tired grin. Didn't find a familia, he admitted quietly. Guess. Nobody wants me yet. Bell sank into the same seat he'd taken before, shoulders heavy, eyes distant. Seer appeared moments later with a plate of stew and a mug of cider, setting them in front of him with a soft smile. On the house again, she said, sliding onto the bench beside him. Bell mumbled a thank you, poking at his food. Rough day? She asked gently. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Seer leaned closer, her tone warm and reassuring. Hey, don't give up yet. Everyone starts somewhere, right? Tomorrow's another chance. Bell met her eyes and managed a small smile. Yeah, maybe you're right. Seer watched Bell stare into his drink, lost in thought, and tapped her chin with a playful smile. All right, she said, standing. If you're just going to mope, then you can help me instead. Bell blinked in surprise. I'll help you. She nodded, handing him a rag. Wipe the tables, carry dishes, anything to keep your mind off today. Ryu looked over from the counter, giving a small approving nod. Bell hesitated, then stood up, smiling faintly. I guess I can do that. Seer grinned. Good. You'll earn your meal this time. Bell chuckled softly. Fair enough. I could use the distraction. As Bell carried plates from one table to another, the tavern buzzed with the chatter of adventurers fresh from the dungeon. He caught bits of their conversations, talk of new monsters, treasure finds, and the danger of the lower floors. At one corner, laughter erupted as Loki, already red-faced from drink, clinked mugs with her boisterous familia. The sight of them strong, confident, unshaken made Bell pause for a moment, tray in hand. Seer nudged him gently. Don't stare too long, she teased. Bell smiled sheepishly and got back to work, though his eyes still flicked toward the lively group now and then. Bell took a deep breath and walked toward the rowdy table where Loki and her familia were drinking. Excuse me, Lady Loki, he began nervously. The goddess turned mid-sip. Can I join your familia? The question hit her harder than the ale beer shot from her nostrils, spraying the table. The room went dead silent for a heartbeat before bursting into laughter. Even Loki's own familia doubled over, pounding the table. Bell froze, face burning red. Loki wiped her nose, coughing between laughs. Kid, you nearly killed me, she wheezed. The tavern roared again, laughter bouncing off every wall. The laughter was still fading when Bet slammed his mug down, eyes narrowing at Bell. Beat it, rookie. You think you can just stroll up and join us? He growled, his voice echoing through the tavern. Bell flinched but stood his ground, fists clenched. Before he could answer, Loki raised a hand, smirking despite the beer still dripping from her nose. Easy, Bet, she said, leaning back in her chair. Her crimson eyes studied Bell with new curiosity. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. Now tell me why my familia? What makes you think you belong with us? Bell scratched his cheek nervously and said, I don't know much about familias yet. I just saw how lively your group was and thought, if I could laugh like that after a day in the dungeon, that'd be enough. The room went quiet for a beat before Bet groaned, slamming his mug down. Are you kidding me? That's the dumbest reason I've ever heard, he barked, earning a few chuckles from nearby adventurers. Bell winced, but Loki only smirked, leaning forward with a glint in her crimson eyes. Huh, you've got guts, kid. Dumb, sure but honest. I kinda like that. Loki leaned back in her chair, smirk widening as she grabbed a fresh mug of beer. All right, kid, she said, slamming it down in front of Bell. You want to join my familia? Then prove you've got spirit. Let's have a drinking contest. Whoever drinks the most wins. Maybe then I'll think about it. The tavern erupted in cheers and laughter. Bell blinked, eyes wide. De-drinking? But I've never. Loki cut him off, already raising her mug. Too late. First one's on me. Bet howled with laughter. Seer sighed from across the room. Ryu muttered, this won't end well, as Bell gulped nervously. Bell Cranel had never drunk alcohol in his life, but after 12 mugs of beer, he was laughing louder than half the tavern. His cheeks glowed crimson, his white hair messy and sticking up in every direction. The Loki familia had accepted him into their chaos for the night, mugs clinking and voices booming in song. Even Bet, red-faced and grinning, had his arms slung around Bell's shoulders, yelling, You're all right, rookie. Another round. Bell could barely stay upright, laughing helplessly as Loki herself stood on the table beside him, singing off-key and pounding her mug in rhythm. Drink up, kid, Loki roared, sloshing half her beer over both of them. You've got the soul of an adventurer if you can keep up with me. At a nearby table, Finn rubbed his temples, exhaling a long, weary sigh. Every time, he muttered. Every single time she drinks, chaos follows. Riveria wasn't even watching anymore. She had simply accepted defeat, sipping tea in quiet resignation. Meanwhile, across the room, Seer stood behind the counter, a dishcloth in her hand, watching the absurd scene unfold. Bell was swaying from side to side, singing a garbled song about heroes and soup, while Bet howled with laughter and Loki pretended to conduct an invisible orchestra. Seer blinked, half amused, half bewildered. How did it turn into this? She whispered to herself. Ryu, standing beside her, shook her head. Loki happened, she said flatly. As the crowd cheered another toast, Bell lifted his mug empty, but proudly raised high. To new friends, he shouted, his grin bright and childlike. Loki threw her head back, laughing. That's the spirit. And for one drunken, golden moment, Bell Cranel felt like he truly belonged. The tavern roared with laughter and song, the air thick with the scent of ale and joy. Bell stood on a table beside Loki, singing loudly with the adventurers, his voice slurred but full of life. Mugs clashed, chairs scraped, and the room swayed in rhythm to their drunken chorus. Loki threw an arm around him, howling with laughter. You've got spirit, Bell, she shouted. He grinned, raising his mug high. To Oreo, the cheer echoed through the tavern. But as the song ended, Bell's vision blurred, the world spinning. His smile lingered a moment longer, then everything faded to black. Bell woke to soft sunlight filtering through the window and the faint smell of bread baking downstairs. His head throbbed like a drum. Blinking groggily, he realized he wasn't in his room. He was in a small, tidy bedroom on the tavern's second floor. Beside him, Seer slept peacefully, her silver hair brushing the pillow. Bell froze, face turning scarlet. What? How? He stammered, sitting up too fast. The hangover hit instantly. The room spun, and he groaned, clutching his head. Never. Drinking again, he muttered weakly. From the doorway, Ryu's calm voice broke the silence. Good morning. You were quite lively last night. Bell let out a weak, half-hearted laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, I don't really remember much from last night, he admitted, his voice hoarse. Ryu raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms as if not entirely surprised. That's understandable, considering how much you drank, she replied dryly. Bell groaned softly, leaning back against the wall. I think Loki challenged me. Then there was singing? And I might have danced on a table. Seer stirred beside him, smiling sleepily. You did, she murmured, giggling. Bell buried his face in his hands. Great. First day in Oreo, and I'm already a mess. Seer stretched and sat up, her silver hair slightly tousled. You should come downstairs and eat, Bell, she said with a gentle smile. Mamma Mia's making breakfast, and you'll need something in your stomach after all that drinking. Bell blinked, still rubbing his aching head. I probably owe her an apology too, he muttered. Seer giggled softly. Maybe, but she'll forgive you faster if you eat. She stood and opened the door, sunlight spilling in. Come on, before Ryu eats all the bread. Bell managed a small smile, pushing himself up. All right. Breakfast sounds perfect right now. Bell carefully made his way down the stairs, gripping the railing as his head still pounded. When he reached the counter, Mamma Mia was already wiping down tables. I'm really sorry about last night, he began sheepishly. I must have caused a lot of trouble. Mamma Mia glanced up, then surprised him with a chuckle. Trouble? Kid, I should be thanking you. Loki spent half her fortune buying drinks for everyone in the tavern. Bell blinked, stunned. She did. Mamma Mia smirked. You started quite the party, boy. Haven't seen the place that lively in years. Bell laughed weakly. Yes, that's something. Bell sat slumped at the table, eyes half open, his hair sticking in every direction. The smell of breakfast made his stomach growl, but even lifting a spoon felt like too much effort. Seer sat beside him, smiling sweetly, holding a bowl of stew. You look half dead, she teased. Here, open up. Before Bell could protest, she scooped a spoonful and held it to his lips. His face turned bright red. Seer, I can eat by myself. She only laughed. Not today, you can't. Bell sighed in defeat, taking the bite as she giggled softly. See? Much better, she said warmly. Bell nearly choked on his food when Seer giggled and said, You know, this feels a little like we're dating. His face turned crimson in an instant, eyes wide. What? D-dating, he stammered, waving his hands helplessly. Seer only smiled, resting her chin in her hand. Well, I am feeding you breakfast, aren't I? That's something couples do. Bell's words tangled in his throat. I didn't mean for you to, I mean. His voice cracked, earning a soft laugh from her. Relax, Bell, she said playfully. I'm just teasing. He slumped forward, cheeks still burning. You're going to kill me, Seer. Bell sat stiffly as Seer cheerfully spoon-fed him another bite, his face still red from embarrassment. Across the counter, Ryu raised an eyebrow, watching the scene with her usual calm expression. She's being unusually affectionate today, she remarked quietly. Mamma Mia, drying a mug, followed her gaze and chuckled. Can't blame her. Look at her smile, she said, voice softer than usual. It's been a while since I've seen Seer that happy. Ryu's eyes lingered on them for a moment before she looked away. Seer laughed brightly at something Bell said, and the sound filled the tavern with gentle warmth. Twilight Manor. Inside the grand halls of Twilight Manor, Loki lay sprawled across a couch, clutching her head dramatically. Riveria. Please, just one little healing spell, she whined, voice pitiful. The elven mage stood nearby with arms crossed, unimpressed. You brought this upon yourself, Loki. Magic won't fix your lack of restraint. Loki groaned louder, rolling over. You're cruel. Heartless. Riveria sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Meanwhile, Bet was crawling across the polished marble floor, muttering curses under his breath. Never again, he groaned, dragging himself toward the stairs. You both look pathetic, Riveria said flatly, though a small smile tugged at her lips. Loki slumped deeper into the couch, holding a cold cloth to her forehead. Ugh. What was the name of that kid again? She mumbled. Finn glanced up from his paperwork. Confused. Kid. Yeah, the white-haired one from the tavern. The one who asked to join us. Loki said, squinting as if trying to focus through the hangover haze. Fiona tilted her head. Did he even tell you his name? Loki blinked, staring blankly for a moment. He didn't, did he? Silence followed. Then Tioni snorted. Figures. Loki groaned, sinking back into the cushions. Great. Can't even recruit, right while drunk. Loki rubbed her temples, still pale from the hangover, and looked over at Finn, who was reviewing reports. Hey, Shorty, she muttered. You didn't happen to see that white-haired kid from last night, did you? The one who wanted to join us. Finn glanced up, brows raised. The boy from the tavern? No, can't say I have. What? Loki sighed dramatically, slumping back in her chair. I don't know. He was a weird one, but there was something kind of funny about him. Maybe we should have given him a chance. Finn chuckled softly. You, turning sentimental? Must still be the hangover talking. Loki smirked at Finn's teasing, propping her head on one hand. Maybe I am hangover, she said, her grin lazy but thoughtful. But that kid, there was something about him. Can't quite put it into words. Not strength, not luck, just something. Finn looked up from his papers, amused. You speechless? Now I know the hangover's bad. Loki chuckled, flicking a cork from an empty bottle at him. Laugh all you want, but I've got a good nose for adventurers, and that one smelled like trouble or promise. Finn only shook his head, smiling. Get some rest, Loki. You're imagining things again. With Bell. As the last customers left and the tavern quieted, Bell wiped the final table clean and let out a small sigh of relief. Seer approached, her apron untied, silver hair catching the warm lamplight. You did great today, she said with a smile. Bell rubbed the back of his neck. Thanks. It was actually kind of fun. Seer tilted her head thoughtfully. The night's still young. How about a walk? The city's beautiful under the lamps. Bell blinked in surprise, then smiled shyly. A walk? Sure, I'd like that. Seer grinned, taking his arm lightly. Then come on, Bell. My treat. The cool night breeze brushed through Aurario's lantern-lit streets as Bell and Seer strolled side by side. The city was quieter now, its usual clamor replaced by soft laughter and distant music. Bell looked around in awe, taking it all in, when Seer suddenly leaned closer, her voice playful. You know, Bell, this really does feel like a date, she teased. Bell nearly tripped, his face turning bright red. A date? And no, I mean it's just a walk. Seer giggled, enjoying his flustered reaction. Sure, she said with a grin. You're blushing an awful lot for just a walk, Bell. As they walked beneath the glowing street lamps, Seer quietly slipped her hand into Bell's. He froze for a moment, his cheeks instantly turning red, but she only smiled, her fingers gently intertwining with his. The warmth of her hand made his heart race faster than any battle could. They walked in silence for a while before Seer spoke softly, her tone curious. Bell, why do you want to be an adventurer? He hesitated, glancing down at their joined hands. I guess. I want to be someone brave, he said quietly. Someone who can protect people and make them smile. Seer glanced at Bell, her expression soft in the lamplight. You really want to be a hero that badly, huh? She asked. Bell nodded slowly, his hand tightening around hers. Yeah, because I know what it's like to feel powerless, he said quietly. To watch things happen and not be able to do anything. If I can become a hero, maybe I can stop others from feeling that way. Maybe I can make a difference, even if it's small. Seer's teasing smile faded into something warmer, almost proud. That's a beautiful reason, Belle, she whispered. Don't ever lose it. Seer slowed her steps, the gentle glow of the street lamps painting her silver hair gold. She looked at Belle with a soft smile. You know, Belle, she said quietly, you don't need to be a hero to be a good person. Belle blinked, surprised. What do you mean? She squeezed his hand lightly. Heroes save the world, but good people make it worth saving. You're kind. You care about others. You already have what matters most. Belle looked down, his cheeks warm. I never thought of it that way. Seer smiled gently. Then start thinking about it now, silly. Belle slowed his pace, eyes drifting toward the glowing lamps lining the street. Maybe you're right, he said softly. But heroes were good people once too, weren't they? They just kept walking the path until others started calling them that. Seer watched him, her teasing smile replaced by quiet admiration. So you still want to follow it? Belle nodded, the faintest smile touching his lips. I don't know where it leads, but I want to find out. Seer's expression softened as she squeezed his hand gently. Then keep walking, Belle, she said warmly. I'll walk with you. Belle smiled. Under the silver glow of the street lamps, Belle and Seer stood close, their hands still entwined. The city had grown quiet, the night air warm between them. Seer looked up, her eyes soft and inviting, her face inches from his. Belle's breath caught his heart pounded, the world narrowing to her gentle smile. But then, something shifted. The sounds of the city faded, replaced by a strange, ringing silence. The air felt heavier, colder. Belle blinked, his instincts flaring. Seer noticed his sudden stillness. Belle, she whispered. He glanced around, eyes sharp now. Something's wrong, he murmured, the warmth instantly gone. The world had gone still. The sounds of Aurario, the distant chatter, the rustle of wind, even Seer's soft breathing, faded into silence. Bell stood frozen in the middle of the empty street, heart pounding. The air felt heavy, cold, as if the night itself were holding its breath. He turned slowly, searching for the source of the unease crawling up his spine. Then he saw her. Bathed in moonlight at the end of the street stood a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her long, silver lavender hair drifted around her like strands of starlight, her skin pale as marble, glowing softly against the darkness. A gown of midnight hues flowed from her form, its fabric shimmered with constellations that flickered and vanished like living stars. Around her, tiny butterflies of light fluttered silently, fading in and out of existence. Bell's breath caught. His pulse quickened, not from fear, not entirely. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that pulled him closer even as instinct screamed at him to run. Her eyes, deep violet and endless, met his, and for a moment he felt weightless, as if every thought, every sound, every heartbeat belonged to her. His knees trembled. A chill swept over his skin, yet his chest burned with something warm, something inexplicable. The goddess, he could only assume she was, once smiled faintly. The motion was small, but it felt as if the night itself shifted to follow her expression. Bell Cranel, she whispered, her voice soft as a dream yet echoing through his entire being. He swallowed hard, unable to look away. In that single heartbeat, Bell knew two things. He had never seen anything so beautiful, and nothing in his life had ever terrified him more. Chapter 2. The Test of Words, Conviction Through Discomfort. Morning sunlight spilled gently across the small room as Bell slowly woke. His head felt clear this time, his body warm and comfortable. When he looked down, he froze. Seer was asleep beside him again, her soft breathing brushing against his shoulder. Her silver hair glimmered in the light, and one arm was draped across his chest, the other resting on his. Bell realized his arm was pinned beneath her, but he didn't move. For a long moment, he simply lay there, watching her peaceful face. A faint smile touched his lips. A soft knock came from the door before Ryu's calm voice followed. "Breakfast is ready," she announced. Bell blinked, startled, then realized Seer was still resting peacefully against him. Thank you, Ryu," he called back quickly, his face turning red. Once the footsteps faded, he looked down at Seer and gently nudged her shoulder. "Seer, wake up. Breakfast's ready." She stirred, letting out a sleepy hum before opening her eyes. Morning already?" she murmured, stretching slightly but refusing to move from his arm. Bell chuckled nervously. "Why, yeah, come on. If we're late, Mamma Mia might scold us both." Bell and Seer descended the stairs together, the morning light from the tavern windows painting the room gold. Mamma Mia looked up from behind the counter, a knowing grin spreading across her face. Well, she said loudly, crossing her arms. "Look who decided to come down together. How was the date, kid?" Bell nearly tripped on the last step, his face turning bright red. "D-date? It wasn't a date," he stammered. Seer giggled beside him, clearly enjoying his panic. "Oh, I don't know," she teased. "It did feel a little romantic." Mamma Mia laughed. "Poor boy, you're already hooked." Bell approached the counter, still looking uncertain. Mamma Mia glanced up from her ledger. "You look troubled, boy. Something on your mind?" Bell hesitated, then rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, last night, I saw someone. Well, I think I did. She was strange, beautiful, but kind of terrifying too. I don't even know if she was human." Mamma Mia raised an eyebrow. "A girl, huh? Or maybe a goddess?" Bell frowned slightly. I don't know. Everything went quiet when she appeared. It felt real, but also like a dream." Mamma Mia's gaze softened. "Careful, kid. Night's tricky." Mamma Mia smirked, resting her elbows on the counter. "So," she said with a teasing tone, "first you go on a date with Seer, and now you're dreaming about another woman? TCH, you work fast, kid. Already cheating, are we?" Bell's face turned bright red. "What? And no, it's not like that," he stammered, waving his hands wildly. Seer, standing nearby, forced a small laugh, though her cheeks flushed faintly. "Mamma Mia, don't tease him like that," she said softly, glancing at Bell. "He's too innocent for that." Mamma Mia chuckled, shaking her head. "Innocent, huh? That's what makes it funny." Bell took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "After everything went quiet, I saw her, a woman standing in the moonlight. She was beautiful, but it felt wrong somehow. The air got cold, and I couldn't move. I've never felt dread like that before." His voice faltered as he looked at Seer, searching her eyes. "You didn't feel it? The silence, the chill?" Seer blinked, shaking her head gently. No, Bell. I didn't notice anything strange. It was just a quiet night. Bell frowned, his hand tightening around his cup. Then, what did I see? He murmured uneasily. Seer watched Bell's uneasy expression for a moment before sighing softly. You're overthinking it again, she said, placing a hand on his arm. Whatever happened last night, it's gone now. Maybe it was just your imagination, or a trick of the light. Bell looked uncertain, but she smiled gently, sliding the plate closer to him. Come on, eat before your food gets cold. You'll feel better with something warm in your stomach. Bell hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe you're right. Seer chuckled quietly. Of course I am, she said, her tone playful again. Now eat, hero in training. As Ryu passed by with a tray in hand, she paused beside their table. Bell Cranel, she said calmly. Have you decided which familia you plan to join? Bell blinked, the question snapping him from his thoughts. Not yet, he admitted. Ryu's gaze softened, though her tone remained firm. You should. Every day, without one, is a day wasted for an adventurer. Then she moved on, leaving Bell staring after her. A spark of realization crossed his face. The Loki familia, he murmured. Standing abruptly, he turned to Seer. I'll try again, maybe she'll accept me this time. Seer smiled. Seer blinked as Bell stood quickly, determination returning. You're going now? She asked. Bell nodded firmly. Yeah, I have to try. Bell stood by the tavern door, adjusting his cloak. Seer watched him from beside the table, her usual smile gentle but wistful. He hesitated for a moment, then turned back and walked toward her. Without a word, he leaned down and wrapped his arms around her. Seer froze, eyes wide. Thank you. For everything, Bell said softly. His voice trembled, full of sincerity. I wouldn't have made it this far without you. Before she could respond, he pulled away, flashing his bright, boyish grin. I'll be back, he called, then sprinted out into the street, heading straight for Twilight Manor. Bell sprinted through the bustling streets of Oreo, his cloak fluttering behind him like a silver banner. The morning sun glinted off the rooftops as vendors shouted and adventurers passed by, but he barely noticed. His heart pounded not from exhaustion, but from determination. People turned to look as he weaved through the crowd, murmuring about the white-haired boy running with such purpose. Please, just one more chance, he whispered under his breath. As he reached the familiar sight of the Twilight Manor, its towering gates gleaming in the light, Bell slowed to a stop, catching his breath, eyes filled with resolve. Bell stopped before the Twilight Manor's gate, catching his breath. Excuse me, he called to the guards, trying to sound confident. Is Lady Loki here? I'd like to speak with her. One of the guards glanced at him, recognizing the earnest boy from before. Sorry, kid. Lady Loki's out, no one knows when she'll be back. Maybe come again later, or tomorrow. Bell's smile faltered. Oh, I see. The guards exchanged a brief, sympathetic look as Bell lowered his gaze. Thanks anyway, he said quietly before turning away. As he walked down the path, the weight of disappointment settled heavily on him. A short while later, Finn approached the gates of Twilight Manor, his calm demeanor masking quiet curiosity. Has Lady Loki returned yet? He asked. One of the guards straightened. No, Captain. She left early with Tiona and the others. No word on when she'll return. Finn nodded thoughtfully, then tilted his head. I see. And who was that boy I heard talking to you earlier? The guards exchanged glances before one replied. White-haired kid. Polite. Said he wanted to speak with Lady Loki. Looked pretty disappointed when she wasn't here. Finn's brows lifted slightly. Next time he shows up, let him through, he instructed firmly. Loki and I will want to speak with him when she returns. The guard saluted. Understood, Captain. Finn gave a nod, his expression unreadable. Let's see what kind of boy he really is. With Loki. Loki strolled through Orario's crowded market with Aes, Tiona, and Riveria by her side. The goddess stopped suddenly, stretching with a grin. All right, girls, she said, hands on her hips. Aes and I have someone to meet. You three handle the familia's supplies for the week. Tioni groaned. You mean we do the boring stuff while you sneak off again? Loki waved dismissively. Oh, come on, it's important business. Riveria sighed, already anticipating trouble. Just don't cause a scene, Loki. Loki winked. Me? Never. Then she turned to Aes. Come on, Sword Princess. Time to meet our mystery guest. Loki and Aes entered a quiet establishment tucked away from Orario's busy streets. The scent of aged wood and wine filled the air, candles flickering softly along the walls. Loki sauntered to a corner table with a playful grin, motioning for Aes to sit across from her. 2 glasses of your best red. Loki told the server, leaning back comfortably. Ace sat silently, hands folded on the table, her golden eyes watching the door. So, Loki said with a sly smile, our mysterious lady should be here any moment. Ace nodded faintly. Do you really think she'll come? Loki smirked. Oh, she will. The tavern door creaked open, and a hush seemed to follow. A lone figure stepped inside, a woman cloaked in deep midnight fabric, the hood shadowing her face. A silver mask covered her features, catching the candlelight in faint reflections. She moved gracefully, her steps soundless against the wooden floor. Loki's grin widened as the woman approached their table and quietly sat across from her. For a moment, no one spoke. The air felt heavier, charged with quiet curiosity. A's hand rested near her sword, instinctively alert, while Loki leaned forward, eyes gleaming with mischief. Well, Loki murmured, you finally came. The mysterious woman's gaze shifted toward A's, her voice calm and melodic. So this is your most prized adventurer? The Sword Princess? She asked, her tone carrying both admiration and challenge. Loki leaned back in her chair, lips curling into a mischievous grin. Maybe she is. Depends who's asking. The woman's hand rose slowly to her mask, unclasping it with deliberate grace. When it fell away, the soft glow of candlelight revealed her face flawless, radiant, unmistakable. Freya smiled faintly, her silver eyes glimmering with amusement. Still playing with mortals, Loki? Loki chuckled lowly. Says the goddess who collects them. The candlelight flickered between them, shadows dancing across the table. Freya swirled her wine lazily, her gaze lingering on A's for a moment before settling on Loki. I met someone interesting last night, she said softly, voice like velvet. A boy. White hair, red eyes. So full of longing, he almost glowed. Loki's grin didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. Oh, you don't usually talk about your toys so soon. Freya smiled faintly, unbothered. He wasn't like the others. There's something in him, something that stirs the heart. Even my children noticed. Ace looked between them, confused. Who is she talking about? Loki waved a hand. Probably some poor fool she's already planning to steal. Freya leaned forward, eyes glinting. You'd like him, Loki. Brave, naive, pure, a perfect little flame for your familia's cold nights. Loki chuckled, tilting her glass. Careful, Freya. Flames burn fast. And you? You always end up smothering what you desire. Their gazes locked, divine tension humming in the air. Freya's smile deepened. Perhaps. But this one. I'd rather see him bloom first. Loki set down her glass, her grin curling wider. Then maybe I'll get to him before you do. A's blinked as the two goddesses exchanged knowing smiles, neither laughing, neither yielding. Between them, unseen, the faintest spark of destiny flickered to life. The unfamiliar tavern pulsed with wild energy, far rougher than Mamma Mia's cozy establishment. The air was thick with smoke, laughter, and the sour tang of spilled ale. Adventurers from every corner of Oreo packed the room, mercenaries, sellswords, and rogues shouting over one another. A drunken brawl had already broken out near the back, a table splintering under a man's weight. Music clashed with laughter, a lute player barely keeping rhythm as coins and bottles flew. Barmaids hurried through the chaos, dodging hands and curses. It wasn't warm or welcoming, this was the raw heartbeat of Orario's darker, louder taverns. Freya's tone shifted, the playful lilt gone. Joking aside, Loki, did you feel that enigmatic divinity stirring in Oreo last night? Her silver eyes glimmered knowingly over the rim of her glass. Loki's grin faded, replaced by a rare seriousness. Yeah, she said quietly, tracing her finger along the table's edge. Hard to miss when the night itself decides to breathe again. Freya tilted her head, her smile faint but sharp. So she's awake then. Loki sighed, leaning back. Seems so. Took her long enough. For a moment, neither spoke, two goddesses remembering the name they dared not say aloud. Ace looked between the two goddesses, confused by the sudden tension. Who are you talking about? She asked quietly. Loki's eyes stayed fixed on Freya, her playful air gone. Tell me, she said, voice low. Is she moving again? The question carried a weight Ace couldn't place, but Freya understood instantly. The silver-haired goddess exhaled, gaze distant. Not yet, she replied softly. But her presence brushed Oreo like a whisper. Loki frowned, drumming her fingers against the table. Then she's awake, she muttered. And that means trouble. Ace glanced between them again, unsettled. Whoever she is. You both look worried. Loki suddenly burst into laughter, breaking the heavy air. Worried? Me? She said between chuckles, waving a hand. You've been spending too much time reading Riveria's expressions, Ace. Freya smiled faintly, though her eyes still carried a hint of unease. Loki stood, tossing a few Valis onto the table for the wine. Well, it's been fun, Freya. Try not to let your pretty head overthink it. Freya inclined her head gracefully. And you? Loki, try not to cause more chaos than usual. Loki smirked, turning to leave with Ace. No promises, she called over her shoulder, laughter echoing behind her. With Bell. Bell ran through the bustling streets of Oreo, his boots clattering against the cobblestones. The sun was already dipping low, casting long shadows across the city. He weaved through merchants and adventurers, breathless but determined, heading straight for Mamma Mia's tavern. As the familiar building came into view, warmth flooded his chest, his little corner of comfort in the city. But when he reached the entrance, he stopped, hesitating. The laughter and noise from inside spilled out into the street, lively as ever. Bell stood there quietly, catching his breath, wondering how he was going to explain another failed attempt. Bell stood frozen before the tavern door, rehearsing excuses in his head. Maybe I'll just say Loki wasn't there. Yeah, that's true, he murmured. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open only to feel the world twist. The warmth and laughter vanished. In an instant, Bell was standing on sand, the ground warm beneath his boots. The air was dry, silent, and heavy with the scent of dust. Above him stretched a vast, endless sky of black velvet scattered with millions of stars, glittering like diamonds on ink. The tavern was gone. Oreo was gone. Only the whisper of the wind remained, carrying faint echoes that sounded almost like voices. Bell turned slowly, confusion gripping his chest. The horizon stretched infinitely, dunes rolling beneath the dark heavens. His breath came shallow as he whispered, "Where am I?" Then, the stars flickered. No, they moved, shifting as though watching him. A faint tremor passed through the air, and the sand rippled beneath his feet. Bell's heart pounded. This wasn't a dream. It was too vivid, too heavy. He took a step forward, the soft crunch of sand echoing in the stillness. And far above, something vast stirred behind the stars. Bell froze as a soft glow bloomed across the dark horizon. The air shimmered, and from the heart of the desert, a figure began to take shape, walking toward him with the grace of flowing water. His breath caught. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Her silvery lavender hair flowed like moonlight, strands drifting weightlessly in the still air. As she approached, her hair darkened, the color deepening into a cascade of liquid shadow, each movement reflecting faint glimmers of starlight. Intricate hair ornaments, shaped like butterflies and crescent moons, glinted softly against her flowing locks. She wore a hanbok-style gown, its layers of dark silk rippling like waves, embroidered with faint constellations that seemed to shift with her every step. The ribbons at her waist trailed behind her, glowing faintly like strands of the night sky. The desert wind carried her scent, faint jasmine and midnight air. Belle couldn't move, couldn't even speak. She wasn't walking on the sand. It felt as if the sand itself parted for her. Her gaze lifted to meet his, violet and endless. The world seemed to fade, the stars dimming around her. In that moment, Belle forgot to breathe. Belle's eyes widened as realization struck him like lightning. It was her, the woman from that night, the one who had filled him with both terror and awe. The same presence that had silenced the world now stood before him, more radiant than he remembered. Her beauty was overwhelming, almost unbearable. Every movement shimmered with impossible grace. The dread he once felt was still there, curling in his chest like a shadow, but alongside it bloomed something stronger, something he couldn't name. His heart pounded wildly as he whispered to himself, "It's her. But she's even more beautiful than before." The girl's steps were soundless as she approached, her presence commanding yet serene. The starlight seemed to bend toward her, drawn by her very existence. When she finally stood before him, she smiled softly, her voice flowing like silk through the still air. "Do not be afraid," she said gently. "I am Nyx." The name echoed through the desert like a whisper from the heavens. Belle's lips parted, but no words came out. His throat tightened, his mind blank. Every instinct told him to bow, to speak, to do something, yet all he could do was stare, utterly spellbound by her. Nyx stood before him, her violet eyes glowing like twin stars in the dark. Her voice was soft, but every word carried the weight of eternity. "It's nice to finally meet you, Bell Cranel," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "The chosen son of Olympus." The title struck him like a thunderclap. Bell's breath caught, his lips trembling, but no sound came out. His mind raced, yet every thought scattered like sand in the wind. He could only stare, heart pounding, lost between awe and fear. Nyx stepped closer, her presence enveloping him in warmth and darkness all at once. "Do not fear," she whispered. "Our paths will cross again soon." Before Bell could speak, the desert began to fade, the stars dissolving into mist. He gasped, eyes flying open. The familiar scent of ale and roasted food hit him all at once. He was back inside the hostess of fertility, lying on the floor. Ryu knelt beside him, concern in her eyes, while Mamma Mia loomed nearby, arms crossed. "You finally awake, boy?" Mamma Mia grunted. Bell blinked, dazed, heart still racing. What happened?" he murmured, but his voice trembled. The memory of Nyx's eyes still lingered, burning like starlight in his mind. Seer entered the hostess of fertility, humming softly, arms full of groceries. The lively chatter greeted her, but her eyes immediately found Bell sitting near the counter, his face unusually pale. Setting the bags down, she hurried over. "Bell, what's wrong? You look pale." Her voice carried genuine worry. Ryu, polishing glasses nearby, answered calmly. "He lost consciousness earlier when he entered the tavern." Seer's eyes widened, her hand instinctively reaching for his arm. Bell quickly forced a laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Oh, don't worry. It's nothing serious. Must have been the heat, that's all," he said awkwardly. Seer frowned, her worry deepening as she placed a gentle hand on Bell's shoulder. "Don't push yourself, Bell," she said softly, her voice full of concern. "You still look pale." Bell tried to smile, but it only made him look more exhausted. From behind the counter, Mamma Mia crossed her arms and gave a low grunt. "The girl's right. Take it easy, kid. Rest for a while before you keel over again." Bell chuckled weakly, waving a hand dismissively. "Really, I'm fine, Mamma Mia. It's just the heat, that's all," he said, though his faint voice betrayed his exhaustion. Mamma Mia sighed, shaking her head as she wiped her hands on her apron. "All right, enough fussing," she said firmly, glancing at Seer and Ryu. "You two, back to work. The lunch crowd's not going to serve itself." Seer hesitated, still looking worriedly at Bell, but Mamma Mia's tone left no room for argument. "And you," she said, turning to Bell with a softer voice. "Go upstairs and get some rest before you drop again." Bell blinked, startled by her concern, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am," he said with a sheepish smile, slowly standing at Seer's side and returned to her duties. Bell climbed the stairs quietly, the wooden steps groaning beneath his tired feet. His body still felt heavy, his thoughts drifting like fog. When he reached the living quarters, he sat down on the bed and loosened his tunic, the soft fabric brushing against his skin. A faint breeze slipped through the open window, carrying the scent of the afternoon meal below. "Just need a minute," he muttered, lying back and closing his eyes. The noise of the tavern faded. Warmth pressed against his face, and soon his breathing slowed. Then, in the stillness, the darkness of sleep claimed him. Bell drifted through darkness, neither asleep nor awake. The air felt thick, shimmering with distant whispers. He stood or thought he did upon a surface that rippled like water, yet held his weight. Above him stretched a sky without stars, vast and endless, breathing in rhythm with his pulse. From the silence, a presence unfolded. Not footsteps, not sound, just a feeling that filled the void. A faint glow bloomed before him, soft and silver, like moonlight caught in motion. Within it, the outline of a woman took form, hair flowing as if woven from the night itself with silver like lavender, eyes deep as eternity. No words were spoken, yet he understood. The presence drew closer, and the light touched his chest, warm and heavy, sinking into him. Patterns like constellations bloomed briefly across his skin before fading into shadow. He felt something old stir within, something vast, serene, and infinite. When she leaned close, her voice wasn't heard but felt, vibrating through his bones like the breath of the world itself. "Walk quietly, little one. Even the stars rest in the dark." Bell reached out, but the vision shattered like glass. The last thing he remembered was the feeling of the night embracing him, calm and endless. Bell jolted awake, his breath sharp, sweat clinging to his skin like dew. For a moment, he just sat there, heart racing, his mind hazy from the strange, vivid dream. Yet despite the sweat and heat in his chest, he felt lighter, stronger. His limbs buzzed with quiet energy, as if something inside him had been stirred awake. Turning his head, he noticed Seer sleeping soundly beside him, her soft breathing steady and peaceful. Smiling faintly, Bell slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her. Outside, the world was dim, dawn still waiting to rise. The cool air welcomed him, and without thinking, He started to jog through the silent streets of Oreo, feeling truly alive. Bell jogged through the quiet streets of Oreo, his footsteps echoing softly against the cobblestones. The city was half asleep, wrapped in that rare calm before dawn. He passed shuttered stalls in the marketplace, merchants just beginning to lift their awnings, the scent of fresh bread drifting faintly from a nearby bakery. Blacksmiths were stoking their forges, the first sparks of flame casting brief glows in the dim morning air. The guild hall stood still, its grand doors closed, but its lanterns already lit within signs that the clerks were preparing for another long day. Bell slowed his pace, taking it all in the quiet beauty of Oreo waking. That was when he noticed it. At the end of the street, tucked between two tall marble buildings, stood a stone structure he had somehow overlooked before. Tall arched windows, carved pillars, and a sign etched with elegant letters, the Central Library of Oreo. Bell stopped, blinking in surprise. There's a library, he murmured to himself, feeling a mix of curiosity and wonder. He'd always heard of adventurers chasing glory in dungeons and gods shaping destinies, but here was a place for knowledge, silent and waiting. For some reason, his heart stirred as he stared at it. As Bell stood on the bridge, the first rays of dawn spilled across Oreo, painting the sky in gold and rose. He smiled softly, the warmth brushing against his face. Next time, he murmured to himself, I should bring Seer to see this. The thought made his chest feel light. Turning, he noticed three familiar figures at the far end of the street bed, Tioni and Tiona, stretching and preparing for their morning run. Without hesitation, Bell raised his hand and waved cheerfully. Good morning, he called out. The twins waved back, while Bet just snorted and looked away. Bell continued his jog after waving at the Loki Familia members, a small grin on his face. The streets were brighter now, the morning lights spilling through the rooftops. As he ran, he noticed something unusual. His breathing stayed steady, his legs didn't ache, and his pace never faltered. The fatigue that usually followed him was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady strength flowing through every muscle. This feels different, he murmured, flexing his fingers mid-run. Each stride felt lighter, more natural, as if his body finally caught up to his heart. For the first time, Bell felt stronger. Bell pushed open the door to the hostess of fertility, the warm scent of breakfast greeting him. Morning, he said cheerfully, waving at Mamma Mia and Ryu behind the counter. I'm starving. Mamma Mia looked up from the stove, raising an eyebrow. Back already, huh? Ryu gave a small nod, setting down clean cups. Good morning, Mr. Cranel. Bell grinned, rubbing his stomach. Something smells amazing. Mamma Mia smirked and pointed toward the stairs. Then earn it, kid. Go wake that sleepy girl upstairs. She's been out like a log since last night. Bell laughed and nodded eagerly. Bell climbed the stairs quietly, sunlight spilling softly through the window. He found Seer still curled up in bed, her silver hair a gentle mess, breathing slow and peaceful. Seer, he whispered, leaning closer. Breakfast's ready. She stirred, blinking her sleepy eyes open. Morning, Bell, she murmured, rubbing her eyes and yawning. Moments later, they sat together at the small table, steam rising from freshly cooked eggs and bread. Seer's head drooped as she picked at her food, still half asleep. Bell chuckled softly, shaking his head. Guess it's my turn, huh? He lifted a spoonful and gently held it to her lips. Seer blinked, then smiled faintly before eating, cheeks warming. You're surprisingly sweet for a hero, she teased sleepily. Bell laughed, scratching his cheek. Just returning the favor. Ryu paused mid-step, her keen eyes studying Bell seated beside Seer, gently feeding her with a small, patient smile. Something about him felt different. Bell, she said quietly, you seem changed. Mamma Mia glanced over from behind the counter, nodding in agreement. She's right. You've got a different air about you today, kid. Bell blinked, confused, lowering the spoon. Huh? What do you mean? He asked, tilting his head. Mamma Mia crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes playfully. It's like you've got a new aura around you, calmer, heavier somehow. Did something happen while you were out jogging? Bell looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers before running them across his arms and shoulders. His muscles felt firmer, his movements lighter than before. Now that you mention it, he said slowly, glancing between Ryu and Mamma Mia, I noticed it too earlier. He lifted his arm, watching how easily it moved, how steady his breathing remained. I jogged around the whole city, but I didn't get tired at all, not even once. He gave a small laugh, half amazed, half confused. It's like my body's changed overnight. Mamma Mia and Ryu exchanged knowing looks, but said nothing. Seer, still seated beside Bell, rested her chin on her hand, and glanced at him curiously. "So, Belle," she asked softly, "did you manage to join a familia yesterday?" Belle's smile faded a little, his gaze dropping to his half-empty plate. "No," he admitted, his voice quiet and disappointed. "Not one." The air grew still for a moment. Ryu, standing behind the counter, raised an eyebrow but said nothing, while Mamma Mia paused mid-wipe, giving Belle a long, thoughtful look. Sears smiled gently, trying to lighten the mood. "Then maybe today's your lucky day," she said, nudging his arm playfully, and said with a small smile. "By the way, Belle," she began casually, glancing at him from the corner of her eye, "someone wants to meet with you. I was supposed to tell you yesterday, but you weren't feeling well." Belle blinked in surprise, setting down his cup. "Me? Who'd want to meet me?" Sear only gave a teasing shrug. "You'll see." From behind the counter, Mamma Mia looked over with a sharp side eye, clearly suspicious, but she let it pass with a grunt. "Just don't cause trouble, girl," she muttered. Belle sat quietly, his thoughts swirling. Who could possibly want to meet me, he wondered, staring into his half-empty cup. His mind went through the faces he knew. None seemed likely. Lost in thought, he barely noticed Sear setting something beside him. "You'll understand soon," she said softly, her tone unreadable. Belle looked down to see a folded note resting by his plate. Before he could ask, Sear was already on her feet, tying her apron and moving toward the door. The faint jingle of keys followed as she unlocked the tavern entrance, flipping the sign to open with a calm smile. Belle blinked, finally noticing the folded note Sear had left beside his plate. Curious, he picked it up and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, elegant. "Meet me at the Moonlight Cafe near Central Plaza. I'll be waiting." Belle reread the message twice, his curiosity growing stronger. Standing, he tucked the note into his pocket and turned toward the counter. "Mamma Mia," he called. "I'll be out for a while." The tavern owner glanced up from polishing a mug, arching a brow. "Humph, don't get into trouble, kid," she said. Belle grinned sheepishly. "I'll be fine, promise," he replied. Belle sprinted through the bustling streets of Oreo, weaving between early shoppers and vendors setting up their stalls. The morning sun glinted off the rooftops as he ran, searching for the Moonlight Cafe near Central Plaza. But as he moved, he realized something strange. His legs carried him effortlessly, his breathing light and steady. The cobblestones blurred beneath his boots. Even the wind couldn't keep up. "I'm faster," he muttered between strides, astonished. The strength surging through him felt natural, alive. In what felt like moments, the towering fountain of Central Plaza came into view, glittering beneath the rising sun. Bell slowed his pace as he entered Central Plaza, the morning crowd already beginning to stir. Merchants called out their wares, and the fountain sparkled beneath the sunlight. He turned his head, scanning the rows of buildings until his eyes caught the elegant silver sign, Moonlight Cafe. It stood tucked between two tall marble shops, quiet and refined. Bell stopped at the entrance, catching his breath. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the note Sear had given him and unfolded it once more. The words were simple, but carried weight. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself, then pushed the door open. When Bell stepped into the Moonlight Cafe, the soft chime of the doorbell announced his arrival. The interior was elegant and quiet, filled with the aroma of roasted beans and polished wood. A waiter approached immediately, bowing slightly. "Right this way, sir." Bell followed uncertainly until they reached a corner table where a composed man sat, tall, golden-haired, his posture perfect. The man's sharp coral brown eyes lifted toward him. "You must be Bell Cranel." "Sit." Bell obeyed, unsure of what to say. The man, Hayden Selland, studied him for a moment before calmly asking, "What will you have?" Then, without waiting, he ordered 2 coffees. The waiter approached silently, placing 2 cups of steaming, aromatic coffee upon the polished table. The rich scent of roasted beans mingled with faint notes of caramel and dark chocolate. Hayden lifted his cup with graceful precision, the faint clink of porcelain echoing in the quiet cafe. His gaze never left Bell, sharp and unreadable beneath the soft morning light. "Tell me, Mr. Cranel," he began, his voice smooth yet commanding, "what drives a boy like you to this city of gods and monsters? What is your goal, glory, wealth, or the illusion of heroism?" He set his cup down gently, the sound deliberate. "Oreo devours the unprepared. Those who enter without purpose are not adventurers, they are offerings. So tell me, why have you come here, and what do you truly seek?" Bell straightened in his seat, his nervousness melting into a grin. "Because this is where heroes are born. Everyone knows that," he said with a spark in his eyes. "If you want to be great, you start here, right?" His enthusiasm filled the quiet cafe, earning a few curious glances from nearby patrons. Then his tone softened, a shy chuckle escaping him. Even if I have no idea what I'm doing. Hayden regarded him in silence, one brow faintly raised, his expression unreadable. After a pause, the older man exhaled slowly. How refreshingly honest, he murmured, voice laced with faint amusement. Hayden regarded Bell in silence, his gloved fingers poised against his chin. Then, a soft, measured chuckle escaped him, neither kind nor mocking, simply knowing. Heroes are born here, you say? He repeated, voice low and composed. How charmingly innocent. He leaned back, the faint glint of amusement in his coral brown eyes sharpening like a blade beneath velvet. Oreo doesn't birth heroes. Mr. Cranel devours dreamers. This city forges monsters, saints, and corpses, often in the same breath. Those who walk in shouting of heroism are usually the first to vanish beneath its stones. He folded his hands neatly before him. Yet, his gaze lingered, appraising. There's something oddly refreshing about such foolish courage. Tell me, when this city demands you choose between your dream and your life, will you still chase your legend, or will you run with the rest? Bell hesitated, his hand tightening around the warm cup before him. For a moment, he couldn't find the right words. The weight of Hayden's voice lingered like the chill of steel, measured, elegant, inescapable. But then he smiled. Not out of arrogance or defiance, just simple, earnest belief. Maybe you're right, he said quietly. Maybe Oreo devours dreamers. But even if it does, then I'll just have to keep climbing out. He looked up, meeting Hayden's gaze head-on. I don't want to be a hero because it's easy. I want to try because someone has to. Silence fell. The cafe's soft chatter seemed to fade, the air holding its breath. Hayden didn't speak immediately. His sharp eyes studied Bell's expression, the sincerity, the lack of hesitation. It wasn't bravado. It was conviction without armor. Finally, he exhaled, a sound halfway between a sigh and a chuckle. How terribly inefficient, he murmured. You lack training, refinement, and sense. Then, his tone softened barely. And yet, I find it difficult to dislike you. He rose smoothly, placing a few vallis on the saucer. Oreo doesn't deserve your kind of foolishness, Mr. Cranel, but the gods will fight over it all the same. Bell blinked, confused. Wait, what does that mean? Hayden turned, coat flowing behind him as he started for the door. It means, he said without looking back, you've passed a test you didn't know you were taking. The bell over the door chimed softly as he left, leaving Bell alone at the table, his untouched coffee still steaming, and the faintest trace of perfume and command lingering in the air. Bell sat alone at the quiet cafe, his untouched coffee growing cold as the morning bustle faded outside. Hayden's words echoed in his mind, a test he didn't know he was taking. He frowned, running a hand through his hair. What did he mean by that? He muttered softly. The man's calm voice, his sharp eyes, the way he carried himself, it all felt different, like someone far above an ordinary adventurer. Bell sighed, leaning back in his chair. Just who is he? He wondered aloud, unaware that his meeting had already stirred ripples among gods far beyond his understanding. Bell walked through the bustling streets of Oreo, the noon sun beating gently on his back. Hayden's words replayed in his mind, heavy despite the bright day. When that moment comes, will you still stand? He frowned, weaving through merchants and adventurers, his thoughts louder than the crowd. What did it mean to truly stand? To not run, even when everything hurts? He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure whether to feel inspired or frustrated. Easy for him to say, he murmured with a small sigh. The familiar sign of the hostess of fertility soon came into view ahead. Just as Bell was about to push open the door to the hostess of fertility, a familiar voice called out from behind him. Boy, white hair. Loki's teasing tone was unmistakable. Bell turned, startled, to see Loki waving lazily with A's standing beside her, calm as ever. You're that kid from the tavern, right? Loki grinned, eyes glinting with mischief. Bell froze for a second before nodding quickly. Why, yes. Good afternoon, Lady Loki, Miss A's. Loki chuckled, leaning forward with a smirk. Running around again, huh? You sure got some energy for a kid who drinks like a veteran. Bell hesitated at the doorway, but before he could step inside, Loki slung an arm around his shoulders with a grin. Come on, kid, let's grab a seat. I'm thirsty already, she said, dragging both him and A's toward the entrance. The moment they entered, the tavern's usual noise dimmed for a heartbeat. Loki's presence always did that. Mamma Mia looked up from the counter, brow arching. Well, if it isn't Loki, don't tell me you're here to start trouble. Loki laughed, waving a hand. Not just following this kid. Something about him made me feel like dropping by. Belle sat nervously across from Loki and Ace at the familiar corner table, still unsure how he'd ended up sharing it with them. Loki leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. So, Belle, how's the day treating ya? She asked with a sly grin. Belle smiled awkwardly. Oh, it's been good. Just busy, I guess. Ace watched him quietly, her golden eyes calm but curious. Loki smirked, swirling her drink. Busy, huh? That mean you've joined a familia yet? Belle rubbed the back of his neck, looking sheepish. Not yet, he admitted. Still trying to find one that'll take me. Loki leaned back in her chair, watching Belle with a curious glint in her crimson eyes. You know, she began casually, tracing her finger around the rim of her mug. My familia's always looking for people with guts. Not strength, not fame, just guts. Belle blinked, unsure if she was hinting at something or just talking. Ace glanced at her goddess, but said nothing. Loki smirked at Belle's puzzled expression. Of course, not everyone can handle the chaos we live with, she added playfully. Still, a kid like you might fit right in. If you ever found the door. Belle blushed, smiling nervously. Belle opened his mouth, ready to answer Loki's invitation, when the tavern doors creaked open. The sound cut through the chatter like a blade. Two figures stepped inside, Hayden Selland, calm and composed in his elegant coat, and Alan Fromel, his raven block hair glinting under the lantern light. Every conversation died instantly. Even Loki's grin froze mid-curve. Mamma Mia glanced up from behind the counter, her expression wary. The atmosphere shifted, heavy, expectant. Hayden's sharp eyes scanned the room until they landed on Belle. With a polite nod, he said evenly, Mr. Cranel, my lady requests a word. The tavern's air felt thick enough to cut as Loki leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing with a mischievous grin. Well, she drawled, voice dripping with mockery. If it isn't the silver snake from her lot. Hayden stopped a few paces from their table, expression unbothered. He bowed his head slightly, the picture of composure. Lady Freya sends her regards, Loki, he said smoothly. And a question for the boy. His gaze flicked to Belle, calm yet sharp enough to silence even bet if he'd been there. Loki's grin sharpened into something predatory. Too late. I saw him first. She reached over and ruffled Belle's hair like a prize she'd already claimed. Hayden's smile didn't falter. Then perhaps, he said softly, every word deliberate. My lady and yours should compare who looks longer. The tavern went utterly still. Even the air seemed to hesitate. A faint tremor of divine pressure rippled through the room, clinking glasses and dimming lanterns. Ace's hand shifted subtly toward her sword. Mamma Mia slammed a mug on the counter. Not in my tavern, she barked. Both gods' representatives relaxed, just enough. But the spark had already been struck. The game had begun. Whispers spread through the tavern like wildfire. Adventurers leaned toward each other, eyes darting between Loki's table and the newly arrived Freya Familia emissaries. Wait, are they fighting? Someone muttered. That's Loki's crew and Freya's men. What are they both doing here? Another voice hissed. No way. They're not fighting over him, are they? All eyes turned to Belle, sitting frozen in his chair. Who is that kid? An adventurer whispered, gripping her utensils tight. The tension thickened with every murmured guess, disbelief mixing with awe. Two of Aurario's most powerful familias. And somehow, the rookie sat at the center. Seer pushed open the tavern door, humming softly, only to stop mid-step as the heavy tension hit her. The air felt charged, eyes darting between Loki's smirk and Hayden's calm stare. What in the world? She whispered, clutching her basket of groceries. Spotting Ryu behind the counter, she hurried over. Ryu, what happened? She asked, voice low but worried. Ryu glanced toward the table where Belle sat between the two factions, her expression unreadable. The two strongest familias in Aurario, she said quietly, seemed to be fighting. Over him, Seer blinked, stunned, her eyes softening as they fell on Belle. Seer stood quietly by the counter, her usual gentle smile resting on her lips, though her eyes shimmered with something deeper, something unreadable. She watched as Loki smirked across the table, while Hayden's polite calm carried the weight of Freya's divine will. The tension between them was almost tangible. Mamma Mia, wiping a mug with deliberate slowness, rolled her eyes and muttered, not again. Damn gods and their games. Around them, the tavern held its breath. A's golden gaze flicked toward Belle, calm yet curious, as if she, too, wondered what path he would choose. Belle sat frozen between them, Loki's grin on one side, Hayden's calm authority on the other, his heart hammering in his chest. Awe, fear, and disbelief tangled together inside him. Why me? He thought. gripping his knees under the table, uncertain whether to stand or stay still as the god's eyes bore down on him. Bell sat frozen, his heart pounding like a drum. Two of Arario's most powerful familiars, Loki and Freya's, were staring him down, each expecting an answer he couldn't give. His palms were slick with sweat, his thoughts a storm. Why me? What do I do? The air felt too heavy to breathe, every gaze pressing on him like a weight. Loki smirked, confident and fiery. Hayden watched with calm precision, unreadable. Around them, whispers filled the tavern. Bell's chest tightened. This was a crossroads he never imagined standing at. He wanted to speak, to choose, but fear and confusion stole his voice. Chapter 3. The Night Alchemy Bled Souls. The air inside the hostess of fertility was thick enough to choke on. Bell sat in the center of it all, Loki grinning across the table, Hayden standing like a silver statue of poise and danger. The entire tavern felt like a powder keg, two divine wills pressed against each other, and he was trapped between them. Loki leaned forward, voice teasing but sharp. So, Bell, how about it? You ready to join? The rest of her words were lost in a thunderous explosion. The floor quaked. Windows shattered in a violent burst, and a wave of heat and smoke blasted through the tavern. Without thinking, Bell moved. He lunged across the table, wrapping Seer in his arms and turning his back to the blast. The shockwave hit, slamming him into the floor. Glass and wooden shards tore through the air, slicing past him. He gritted his teeth, his body shielding her completely. Bell. Seer's muffled cry came from his chest. I'm fine, he said, breathless. Stay down. The tavern dissolved into chaos. Tables overturned, adventurers shouting, smoke rolling in. Mamma Mia barked orders while Ryu dashed for the back to check for fire. Hayden brushed dust from his coat, calm even amid the smoke. How untimely, he murmured, signaling Alan with a flick of his wrist. His spear was already half drawn as he darted outside, raven black hair flashing through the smoke. Ace followed seconds later, wordless, her golden eyes sharp and calm. His gaze flicked toward Bell and Seer, still on the ground, a faint, assessing smile playing at his lips. Loki rose with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Guess our talk's postponed, she muttered. Bell finally stood, helping Seer to her feet. She clung to his sleeve, trembling but safe. Outside, the sound of chaos grew louder. Screams, crumbling stone, roars. Bell turned toward the door instinctively. The explosion next door had thrown the street into pandemonium. Smoke poured from shattered windows, flames licking up the walls as people screamed and scattered in every direction. Stalls lay overturned, fruits and fabrics burning in the gutter. Adventurers and guards rushed toward the blast site, weapons drawn, shouting for civilians to fall back. The air stank of ash and magic, the ground trembling with aftershocks. Horses neighed, carriages toppled, and the crackle of fire drowned all other sounds. From inside the hostess of fertility, Bell watched the chaos unfold, eyes wide, the city he admired now burning. The city guard battalion charged into the smoke-choked street, their boots pounding against cracked cobblestones. Alan Fromel and Ace Wallenstein led the way, blades drawn, their presence steadying the panicked civilians. But the moment their feet crossed the scorched ground, a sigil flared beneath them, an intricate magic circle carved into the earth, glowing with sinister violet light. Ace gasped, her knees buckling as the Falna's divine flow bled away like draining water. Alan cursed under his breath, his strength ebbing, spears suddenly heavy. Around them, guards collapsed, clutching their chests as their magic flickered out. The circle pulsed again, siphoning divinity itself. The ground split open with a deafening crack, and from the glowing circle burst a mass of twisting vines and thorns. The cobblestones shattered as a giant plant-like monster erupted, its roots writhing like serpents, eyes glowing with the same sickly violet light as the magic circle. Screams filled the air as its tendrils lashed out, impaling the unlucky and dragging them into its gaping maw. Each pulse of the circle made it grow larger, stronger, feeding on the stolen Falna energy. Ace struggled to rise, her strength fading, while Alan gritted his teeth, realizing the creature was fueled by their own divinity. The city guards outside the glowing circle rallied quickly, forming ranks and hurling their spears at the monstrous tangle of vines. The weapons struck true, but the wooden shafts splintered, the steel heads swallowed by the creature's pulsing mass. The plant monster shrieked, a guttural sound that rattled windows, and retaliated with a furious lash. Thick tendrils whipped across the street, tearing through armor and stone alike. One guard was flung into a wall, another vanished beneath writhing roots. The men faltered, horror spreading as they realized their attacks only enraged the creature, its power growing with every heartbeat. Bell burst through the tavern doors, the heat of the explosion still lingering in the air. His eyes widened as he saw the street in chaos, shattered stone, fleeing civilians, and at the center, a massive plant monster thrashing wildly. Its roots tore through the cobblestones, glowing with eerie violet light from the magic circle beneath it. Bell froze for a heartbeat, then felt the strange pull in the air, the divine energy draining away. His mind pieced it together instantly. It's feeding on fauna. He realized. That circle. It's stealing their strength and giving it to that thing. Bell's gaze darted to a fallen guard's weapon glinting amid the rubble. A simple steel sword, half buried in dust. He snatched it up without hesitation, turning just as the plant monster let out a deafening roar. A massive tendril whipped toward him, the force enough to crush a man. Bell raised the sword, bracing himself. The impact thundered through his arms. Metal shrieked, sparks flew, and then the blade snapped clean in half. Bell stumbled back, shards of steel scattering across the ground. The monster loomed higher, its glowing vines curling toward him, and Bell realized he was completely defenseless. Just as the monster's vine whipped down toward Bell, a streak of emerald light cut through the smoke. Ryu Lion descended from above, her blade shimmering with wind magic as she struck cleanly through the massive tendril. The creature howled, its attack veering off course and slamming into the ground beside Bell instead. Dust and shards erupted, but he was unharmed. Landing gracefully between Bell and the monster, Ryu's sharp eyes never left the enemy. "Stay behind me," she commanded coolly, her aura blazing with focused intensity. Bell could only nod, awe and relief flooding him as the elf advanced fearlessly. Bell watched as Ryu danced between the monster's flailing vines, her blade flashing in arcs of green light. Each strike cut deep, but the creature's wounds closed almost instantly, new vines sprouting from the stumps. The air was thick with the scent of sap and smoke. Ryu's movements grew heavier, her breathing sharp. Bell could see it. The fauna-draining circle was affecting her too. Her magic flickered, the glow in her sword dimming. "Damn it," Bell muttered, fists tightening around the broken hilt in his hand. He wanted to help, but helplessness chained him where he stood. Bell's eyes darted from Ryu's fading strength to the glowing magic circle pulsing beneath the monster's roots. The realization hit him like lightning. It's that circle. It's draining everyone. Gritting his teeth, he sprinted forward, ducking under a lash of vines. With only the jagged half of his broken sword, he jammed the blade into the cracks of the cobblestone and pried hard. The stone resisted, then gave way with a sharp snap, breaking a line of glowing runes. The circle flickered, its light faltering. The monster shrieked in pain, its movements slowing as the energy siphon began to collapse. As the runes dimmed, a surge of energy rushed back through the air. The suffocating weight lifted. Alan Fromel staggered, then straightened, the strength flooding back into his limbs. Nearby, Ace Wallenstein's golden eyes snapped open, her aura blazing to life once more. Around them, dozens of city guards gasped in unison as divine light rekindled across their bodies. Without hesitation, Alan shouted, "Now!" while it's weak, and charged forward. Ace followed, her sword gleaming like sunlight. The guards rallied behind them, formation tightening, shields raised. Together, they surged toward the monster, their regained fauna burning with righteous fury. The giant plant monster let out a deafening roar, thrashing wildly as the adventurers and city guards closed in. Its vines lashed out in desperation, smashing walls and tearing up the street. But this time the blows met steel and fury. Ace cut through its defenses like a golden storm, while Alan drove his spear deep into its writhing core. Spears, magic, and fire converged in a final, blinding assault. The creature screamed as its glowing veins burst, sap and smoke splattering across the cobblestones. With one last convulsion, the monster collapsed, its body shrinking, the magic circle beneath it fading to ash. As the last echoes of battle faded, the street fell into uneasy silence. Smoke curled from the shattered stones, and the weary guards leaned on their weapons, catching their breath. Ace wiped her blade clean, while Bell stood frozen amid the wreckage, chest heaving. From the hostess of fertility's doorway, Hayden Sellen stepped out, his boots untouched by ash. His cold eyes swept over the scene. The ruined street, the faint traces of magic still clinging to the air. Alan Fromel approached, voice rough with exhaustion. "Hayden, do Do you have any idea what that thing was? Hadine's gaze darkened. Something unnatural. Before anyone could speak further, another explosion thundered through the city, distant yet powerful enough to shake the ground beneath their feet. A pillar of smoke rose over the rooftops to the east, followed by the faint echo of screams. Hadine's eyes snapped toward it, his expression turning cold and sharp. This isn't random, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. It's coordinated, multiple strikes. The realization spread like wildfire among the guards. Move. Form teams. Alan barked, already sprinting toward the rising smoke. Horns blared through the streets as Aurario's defenders raced to face the next wave. Bell's instincts screamed to run, to chase the sound of the new explosion, to help. He took one step forward before a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Bell, Seer called, her tone sharp with worry. He turned. She was kneeling beside the injured, blood streaking her apron as she tried to stop the bleeding of a wounded guard. Bell froze, his heart pounding. All around him were cries for help, people trapped under rubble, others too weak to move. He clenched his fists, realizing what needed to be done. Right. People need me here, he whispered, rushing to assist. The afternoon sun hung dim behind rising smoke, casting Oreo in a haze of fire and dust. Loki stood amid the wreckage, her crimson eyes sharp with uncharacteristic fury. The laughter was gone, replaced by grim focus. Another explosion thundered in the distance, shaking the ground beneath her boots. She clenched her fist. It's spreading, she muttered. Then, through the smoke, Bet, Tiona, and Tioni emerged, bruised, dirt-streaked, but ready. About time, Loki said, her tone clipped. We've got hell breaking loose across the city. The twins nodded silently, and Bet growled. Then we stop it. Loki's smirk never returned. Tioni. Loki barked as the Amazonis landed beside her, breathing hard, armor streaked with sap and soot. Report. Tioni wiped her blade clean, her expression grim. They're everywhere. The plant monsters, they're spawning all over the city. We've taken down 3 nests already, but more keep appearing. Loki's eyes narrowed, her playful tone gone. Then we hunt. Split up, no survivors. Burn every root you find. Her familia moved out, steel and magic flashing in the afternoon haze. High above, unseen, 3 figures in plague masks stood upon a rooftop, silent and still, watching Loki's every move like shadows. The hostess of fertility, once filled with laughter and song, had transformed into a makeshift medical ward. Tables were pushed aside, bedrolls laid out, and the scent of blood and smoke hung heavy in the air. Bell Cranel moved tirelessly among the wounded, lifting debris, carrying the injured, his clothes soaked with dust and sweat. Over here, Bell, Seer called, pressing cloth against a soldier's bleeding arm. Bell rushed to her side, helping bandage the wound while Mamma Mia barked orders, her voice booming above the chaos. More water. Keep pressure on that cut. Ryu darted between patients with calm precision, her hands glowing faintly as she used what little magic she had left. Bell knelt beside a crying child trapped beneath a broken beam and, gritting his teeth, lifted it with all his strength. You're safe now, he said softly, helping the boy to his feet. Outside, the city still burned, but within the tavern, there was a fragile rhythm, a fight not of swords, but of compassion. Seer glanced at Bell, her eyes warm despite exhaustion. You're doing great, she whispered. Bell smiled faintly, wiping sweat from his brow. I'm just doing what I can. By the time dawn broke, Oreo had quieted. Only the faint crackle of dying fires and the distant sound of hammers repairing broken streets filled the air. The guild and Mayak familia arrived at the hostess of fertility, bringing crates of herbs, salves, and medical tools. Healers in white aprons moved swiftly through the crowded tavern, tending to the wounded with gentle hands. Mayak himself offered a weary smile to Mamma Mia, who was still directing the chaos like a battlefield commander. You've done well keeping them alive, he said. She only grunted, crossing her arms. Just doing what needed doing. Amid the bustle, Bell, Seer, and Ryu sat slumped in the corner of the tavern, exhaustion finally claiming them. Their hands and clothes were still streaked with soot and dried blood, but their faces were calm. Bell's head tilted slightly to the side, resting against Seer's shoulder. She, in turn, leaned softly against Ryu, who had fallen asleep sitting upright. The morning light streamed through the cracked windows, falling gently over the 3 of them. A small island of peace in a city that had survived a nightmare. For the first time in hours, the hostess was quiet again. The sun rose weakly over Oreo, casting light upon a city scarred by destruction. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the scent of ash clung to the cobblestones. The guild had mobilized fully by morning, dozens of officials, healers, and volunteers flooding the streets to tend to the wounded and search for survivors trapped beneath the ruins. Makeshift aid stations were established in every district, banners bearing the guild's insignia fluttering over tents. Healers from the Dien sect and Mayak Familius worked side by side, their healing magic flaring in soft bursts of gold and blue. Citizens lined up, carrying injured loved ones, some bandaged, others barely conscious. The cries of pain mixed with the quiet murmurs of reassurance as potions were distributed and spells whispered. The Ganesha Familia, disciplined and organized, cleared rubble and carried the wounded to safety. Members of Hermes Familia scouted rooftops, ensuring no further attacks were hidden in the shadows. Guards redirected civilians away from unstable structures, their armor still scorched from the night before. In the midst of it all, a heavy silence lingered, a collective grief for those lost. Streets once filled with laughter and trade were now lined with broken stalls and blood-stained stones. Yet, amid despair, unity bloomed. Strangers helped strangers, adventurers shared supplies, and priests prayed over the fallen. As the day wore on, the city's spirit began to stir again. Children clung to their parents, watching healers work with wide, hopeful eyes. Above it all, the bell tower tolled softly, not for mourning, but for resilience. The people of Orio, battered but unbroken, began to rebuild. The explosions had shaken their walls, but not their will to stand together once more. Ina Tool stood amid the chaos of the guild headquarters, her emerald eyes weary but resolute. The office, usually quiet and orderly, had become a command center, maps spread across tables, runners dashing in and out, and clerks shouting updates over the din. Dust and fatigue clung to her, but she refused to stop. Get more supplies to Deadless Street. The East Ward needs more healers, she ordered, her voice cutting through the noise. Dozens of guild members worked alongside her, their exhaustion visible in the tremor of their hands and the dark circles under their eyes. Yet none paused. Every report of survivors pushed them forward. Ina's quill scratched over parchment as she coordinated teams of adventurers, assigning Loki Familia to reinforce the city center while Ganesha Familia secured the walls. A younger clerk slumped beside her, muttering, "We've been at this since yesterday." Ina gave a tired but gentle smile. "So has everyone else, and they're still standing. We can too." Outside, the wounded were carried in waves, but with each new order, the chaos found rhythm. Ina looked out at the battered city and whispered, "Orio will rise again. We'll make sure of it." The next morning, Bell Cranel jogged through the quiet streets of Orio, the cool air carrying the faint scent of smoke and ash. The city he once admired for its life and color now lay scarred, buildings reduced to rubble, burned stalls lining the marketplace, and cracked streets where roots had torn through stone. Adventurers and workers moved about, repairing walls, clearing debris, and comforting those who had lost their homes. Bell slowed his pace, heart heavy as he passed by the remnants of the chaos. "So much damage," he murmured, clenching his fists. "But everyone's still standing." Bell continued his jog through the bustling morning streets of Orio, the city still bearing the scars of yesterday's chaos near the central district. His goal was clear, the guild hall, where supplies for the wounded were being distributed. Sweat glistened on his brow as he weaved past workers hauling debris and adventurers hauling crates. When he arrived, the once orderly hall buzzed with frantic energy. Clerks shouted inventory lists, healers called for potions, and guards carried boxes of bandages. Bell approached the counter, slightly out of breath. "I'm here to pick up medical supplies," he said. "For the hostess of fertility. They're running low." Bell Cranel jogged through the streets of Orio, a crate of medical supplies balanced carefully in his arms. The city still smelled faintly of smoke and ash, and the echoes of repair work filled the air, hammers striking, carts creaking, people rebuilding. Despite his fatigue, Bell didn't slow. The wounded at the hostess of fertility were counting on him. When he arrived, the tavern was still alive with the rhythm of recovery. Tables had been cleared for makeshift beds, the air thick with the scent of herbs and stew. Mamma Mia stood behind the counter, stirring a large pot of broth, her booming voice cutting through the noise. "You're back, kid? Good. Put those near the counter. We'll sort them." Seer looked up from where she was tending to an injured adventurer, her smile tired but genuine. "Thank you, Belle. We were running low on antiseptic." At another table, Ryu worked silently, changing bandages with steady, practiced hands. Bell set the crate down and joined them, unpacking bottles and herbs. Let's make sure everyone gets what they need, he said, voice firm despite his weariness. In that moment, the tavern wasn't just a refuge. It was hope rebuilt by human hands. The air in the guild's top-floor conference chamber was thick with tension. The Great Round Table, usually a place of cooperation between gods, had become an arena of accusations. Ina Tool, standing before them with papers clutched tightly in her trembling hands, tried to maintain her composure as the voices of the divine clashed around her. "This never would have happened if your familia weren't so reckless," shouted Apollo, slamming his hand on the table. "Oh, please," Loki shot back, lounging in her chair, but her eyes sharp. "You think singing love songs fixes bombings?" Silence, Auranas rumbled, his presence cutting through the noise. "Let the guild representative speak." Ina bowed slightly before continuing, her voice steady despite exhaustion. The explosions and monster outbreaks caused widespread destruction across 5 districts. Damage to infrastructure and property is extensive, estimated at over 50 million valis in total losses. Food stores, medicinal reserves, and trade supplies were also destroyed. Reconstruction efforts will require full cooperation between familias. Murmurs filled the chamber. Mayak sighed heavily. Hephaestus pinched her temple, and Dien Sect leaned forward with folded arms. "And the cause?" he asked. Ina nodded grimly and held up a report marked with the guild seal. Before the first explosion, several witnesses reported seeing individuals dressed in long black coats and plague masks. They moved in coordinated patterns across multiple districts. Their actions suggest premeditated attacks. "We believe these individuals may belong to a group known as the Silent Hand, a radical faction that rejects divine influence and the Fauna system entirely." A ripple of unease spread through the room. Hecate, silent until now, tilted her head. "Fanatics, then?" Ina hesitated. "Possibly, but there's more. Some of their equipment and rune designs match records from Amestris, a nation outside our borders known for alchemic warfare and forbidden experiments. We can't confirm the connection yet, but..." Auranas' eyes narrowed. "You will." The room fell silent for a heartbeat before Loki broke it, voice low. "So we're dealing with zealots, maybe backed by a foreign power." Ina nodded, her expression hard. "Yes, and they're organized." The attacks weren't chaos. They were coordinated strikes meant to cripple Aurario's heart. No one spoke after that. Even gods could feel the weight of what was coming. After the tense meeting at the guild, Loki stepped into the streets of Aurario, her usual grin absent. The afternoon light revealed the city's wounds, shattered walls, scorched stone, and citizens working quietly to clear the debris. Ace walked beside her in silence, her eyes scanning the damage with quiet sorrow. Passing through the central plaza, they saw healers tending to survivors, children clinging to their parents. Loki exhaled, her sharp gaze softening. "Damn bastards really hit us hard," she muttered. At the crossroads, Ace turned toward the Twilight Manor. Loki watched her go, her mind already plotting Aurario's reckoning. Loki pushed open the heavy doors of the Twilight Manor, her expression grim. The air inside buzzed with tension. Adventurers hurried through the halls, carrying reports and tending to wounded comrades. "Where's Finn?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the main chamber. The captain appeared moments later, bandaged but composed. Loki crossed her arms, her crimson eyes narrowing. "Talk to me, short stack. How bad is it?" Finn exhaled, handing her a report. "We've sustained injuries across 3 squads, minor property damage, and lost supplies in the west sector. No fatalities, but morale shaken." Loki's smirk faded completely. Loki sank into her chair in the dim glow of her office, the laughter long gone from her eyes. The report lay open before her, columns of numbers, casualty lists, and grim details of the attacks. She reached for a half-empty bottle of wine on her desk, uncorked it with one hand, and took a slow sip, the burn grounding her thoughts. Her gaze lingered on the pages, tracing the patterns of destruction. "Coordinated. Deliberate," she muttered, tapping a finger against the parchment. The wine did little to dull her thoughts. Whoever orchestrated this, she decided, would soon regret it. In the quiet upper chamber of Folkvanger Freya's manor, Hadine Selen stood by the window, sunlight filtering through the smoke-streaked glass. Below, Aurario moved like a wounded beast, restless, scarred, but alive. On his desk lay a series of reports, bound in black ribbon, the seal of the guild still fresh in wax. He opened them carefully, his gloved fingers tracing each line with measured precision. Descriptions of the devastation unfolded before him. Multiple coordinated explosions, plant-like monsters emerging from alchemic circles, casualties among both civilians and adventurers. His expression did not change, but a subtle tension tightened his jaw. Silent Hand, he murmured, the name lingering like poison. Each report pointed to premeditation, the attacks planned to weaken the city and challenge the god's authority. Haydeen set the papers down and looked toward the horizon, where plumes of smoke still rose. A strike at the divine order itself, he said softly, almost to himself. The door opened slightly, and Alan Fromel entered, saluting. Orders, sir? Haydeen didn't look away from the city. Tell the lady everything. Orio bleeds, and the shadows move beneath the noise. It's time we learn who dares to play God. His reflection in the glass looked colder than ever. 5 days passed since the day Orio nearly fell, and though the city stood once more, its scars remained. Cracked walls bore the memory of explosions. The faint smell of ash still clung to the air, and the once bustling marketplaces moved with a somber rhythm. The guild had declared the dungeon sealed until further notice. No adventuring, no expeditions, not even entry for exploration. For the first time in living memory, the great heart of Orio was silent. The city guards patrolled day and night, their armor polished, but their eyes heavy with vigilance. Posters warning of masked individuals, report immediately, lined the streets. The word Silent Hand had become a whisper of dread in every tavern and market stall. Both the Loki Familia and Freya Familia had mobilized fully, their adventurers operating under strict orders. If a plague doctor is cited, no negotiation. Eliminate with extreme prejudice. Encounters were rare, but when they occurred, the aftermath was always the same. Shattered alleys, scorch marks, and silence. Tension simmered beneath the fragile peace. Every masked face drew suspicion. Every flicker of magic in the alleys made people flinch. Though the fires had long been put out, Orio remained a city on edge, its people haunted by the knowledge that someone, somewhere, still dared to challenge the gods. From the rooftops, unseen eyes watched, plague-masked figures moving like shadows, studying the patrols below. The Silent Hand had vanished as quickly as it appeared, but their presence lingered like a curse over the city. The people rebuilt with trembling hands, but hope, like the morning sun through smoke, was slow to return. After days of tending to the wounded, the hostess of fertility had finally returned to its lively rhythm. The scent of freshly cooked meals filled the air once more, mingling with the laughter of weary but grateful patrons. Mamma Mia stood behind the counter, arms crossed, shouting orders as if nothing had ever changed. Seer moved gracefully between tables, her warm smile brighter than ever, while Ryu served drinks with her usual quiet precision. Bell Cranel, now part of the routine, carried trays and helped in the kitchen. The tavern, once a refuge for the injured, breathed life again. The tavern buzzed with uneasy chatter as adventurers exchanged rumors between mugs of ale. Seer, carrying a tray of drinks, slowed her steps near a group of cloaked men whispering at a corner table. Words like Silent Hand, plague masks, and a mistress drifted through the noise, sending a chill down her spine. She pretended not to listen, offering a polite smile as she placed their orders, but her heart beat faster. Returning to the counter, her expression softened into thoughtfulness. So, they're still here. She mused silently. Behind her calm smile, Seer's eyes darkened, knowing this peace wouldn't last long. The tavern had finally grown quiet. The last customer stumbled out into the cool Orio night, and Mamma Mia turned the lock on the front door with a heavy click. The hum of laughter and clinking mugs faded, leaving behind only the creak of the wood and the faint scent of roasted meat. She sighed, wiping her hands on her apron, when a knock echoed from the back entrance. Firm, deliberate. When the door opened, Loki stepped in first, her usual grin absent. Ace Wallenstein followed closely, calm and sharp as a drawn blade. Finn Dame was next, composed and analytical, while Haydeen Selland and Alan Fromel from the Freya Familia entered like specters, their presence commanding quiet. Ina Toole arrived last, clutching a thick folder of documents. Bell Cranel, who had been wiping tables, blinked in surprise at the gathering. Close the curtains. No one hears a damn word of this, Loki ordered. Mamma Mia complied without question. Seer and Ryu, pretending to tidy the shelves, exchanged tense glances. They knew something serious was about to unfold. Ina placed her folder on the main table, spreading out maps and reports. The Silent Hand has resurfaced, she began, her voice steady but tired. The guild's investigation confirms their involvement in the recent attacks. They're not just anarchists. They're an organized faction backed by a mistress. a nation built on alchemy and human experimentation. A low hum spread around the table. Alan's eyes narrowed, and Loki leaned back, arms crossed. So, they've crawled out of their hole again, huh? Ina nodded grimly. Yes, they've been smuggling weapons and alchemic devices into the city. The explosions and monster summoning were only tests. They're studying how to weaken the fauna, how to nullify it completely. Finn leaned forward, brows furrowed. Their target must be the guild or Babel itself. If they can sever the god's power, they can seize control of the dungeon. Hadine's tone was calm, but laced with disdain. Amestris has always desired what only the gods can create. They believe if they harness the dungeon's source, they can grant themselves divinity. Huh, Loki barked, slamming a fist on the table. Mortals playing gods again. They never learn. Ina took a breath, flipping to another report. There's more. We've received eyewitness accounts of plague-masked figures, possibly alchemists, moving through the lower districts. They're targeting workshops, smithies, and potion shops. Their goal seems to be crippling Aurario's infrastructure before another assault. Mamma Mia grunted. Cowards attacking from the shadows. Ryu's hand paused mid-wipe as she listened. Seer's gaze darkened subtly. Finn nodded thoughtfully. If they're trying to destabilize us, then they'll move soon. Perhaps within the week. We'll need coordinated patrols. Loki Familia handles the west, Freya Familia the east. Hadine's eyes met Finn's. Agreed. We'll make sure none of them leave the city alive. Loki smirked. And if they do, I'll personally turn him into fertilizer. Bell clenched his fists, eyes burning with determination. Then let me help too, he said firmly. If they're coming for Aurario again, I won't stand by. The room went silent for a moment. Loki's grin returned, faint but approving. Heh, you've got guts, kid. Mamma Mia sighed, shaking her head. You'll be the death of me, Bell Cranel. Seer, from the shadows, smiled faintly. And maybe the light that saves us, she whispered. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of distant bells, the calm before another storm. After the meeting ended, the tension in the tavern slowly eased. The deities and adventurers left one by one, leaving behind the faint smell of wine and parchment. Bell helped Seer clean the tables in silence, both too tired to speak. When Mamma Mia told them to get some rest, they quietly climbed the stairs to the second floor. The moonlight streamed through the small window, soft and calm. Bell lay down beside Seer, exhaustion finally settling in. As his eyes drifted shut, Seer's soft breathing lulled him to sleep. For the first time in days, peaceful and dreamless, or so he thought. There were no colors, no sounds, no dreams. Only an endless void. He realized he wasn't floating, but sinking, slowly and gently, as if gravity itself had turned soft. The air thickened, cool and fluid, wrapping around his skin like a second layer. He looked down, or what he thought was down, and saw the darkness shimmer like liquid glass. Then came the voice. Soft, eternal, familiar. You are restless, my child, it whispered, echoing through the dark. You cling to the waking world, yet your heart seeks mine. Bell tried to speak, but his breath scattered into black mist. The liquid shadows rose higher, up to his chest, then his throat. Do not fight it, the voice said again, her voice. Calm, patient, beautiful. You long for strength. You long for purpose. Then let go. And dive to me. The shadows embraced him fully now, cold but strangely comforting. Bell's heartbeat slowed, echoing in rhythm with the vast pulse of the night around him. His last thought before surrendering was not of fear, but peace, as if the darkness itself had called him home. Bell jolted awake, breathing hard, his heart pounding like he'd surfaced from deep water. The morning light streamed faintly through the window, soft and golden, yet everything felt heavy, unreal. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face, when his fingers brushed against something dry beneath his eyes. Confused, he looked at his hand and froze. Dark, crimson streaks marked his skin, dried tears of blood tracing down his cheeks. For a moment, he could only stare, silent and trembling. He didn't feel pain, only a strange, lingering warmth in his chest, and the faint echo of her voice. Dive to me. Bell wiped the last trace of the dried crimson from his face, still shaken, when a soft knock came at the door. Bell, breakfast is ready, Ryu's calm voice called from outside. Wake Seer as well. Mamma Mia doesn't want the food to get cold. Bell blinked, startled back to reality. All right, I'll be down soon, he replied, forcing steadiness into his voice. He turned toward Seer, still peacefully asleep beside him, sunlight touching her hair. Taking a slow breath, he pushed the strange dream and the blood aside for now. Come on, Seer, he said quietly. Time to wake up. Bell and Seer descended the stairs together, the smell of breakfast filling the tavern. But as they reached the counter, Bell paused. Mamma Mia stood behind it, a gleaming sword resting within reach. Mamma Mia, what's the sword for? He asked cautiously. The woman didn't even glance up from the pan she was stirring. Precaution, she said curtly. City's still tense after what happened. Can't be too careful. She turned, setting plates before them. Now eat. We've got a long day ahead, and I'm not running this place alone. Bell nodded quietly, unease settling beneath the warmth of the meal. When the tavern doors opened, hostess of fertility quickly filled with the morning crowd. The clatter of mugs and chatter of adventurers mixed with the smell of warm bread and stew. Bell hurried between tables, balancing trays and smiling at customers, trying to keep up with the rush. Yet beneath the noise, faint whispers brushed his ears, hushed voices, indistinct words, like echoes from nowhere. They came and went, weaving through the laughter and clinking plates. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus on his work. Probably just tired, he thought, ignoring the strange, lingering murmur in the air. By afternoon, the tavern was alive with noise and laughter, but Bell Cranel heard something else beneath it, the whispers again. Only now, they were louder, clearer, no longer soft murmurs, but cries. Faint, distorted voices that sounded like people in agony, begging, weeping, pleading for release. Every time he blinked, the sound sharpened, as if clawing at the edges of his mind. He tried to focus on cleaning tables, greeting customers, but his hands trembled. Sweat rolled down his temple despite the cool air. His reflection on a glass mug looked pale, almost ghostly. Bell. Seer's voice pulled him back. She stood close, worry in her eyes. You look pale. Are you feeling unwell? Bell forced a smile, shaking his head. I'm fine, just tired, I guess. From behind the counter, Mamma Mia's sharp gaze lingered on him longer than usual. She said nothing, but Bell could feel her watching, judging. The voices surged again. A woman's sob, a man's scream, a child's whisper. Save us. Child of night. His breath hitched. The tray in his hand rattled. Seer touched his arm gently. Bell. He swallowed hard. I just need some air. But even outside, the voices didn't stop. Bell leaned against the wall, shutting his eyes and forcing himself to breathe 5 long, deep inhales and exhales. But the cries persisted, faint yet agonizing, echoing like voices from the grave. When he finally stepped back into the hostess of fertility, the noise sharpened. 2 cloaked figures sat at a corner table, their manner calm, almost rehearsed. Yet to Bell, the sound of suffering was deafening. Near them pleas, sobs, and broken words begging for release. His gaze drifted to their pockets, where faint crimson light pulsed. Red stones, or gems. Whatever they were, they screamed. Bell moved closer to Mamma Mia, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. Those 2, there's something wrong with them, he murmured. I can't explain it, but something's crying near them. Mamma Mia's expression hardened instantly, her hand drifting toward the hidden sword behind the counter. Without hesitation, Mamma Mia moved. In a blur, she reached beneath the counter and drew the hidden sword with a single, fluid motion. The steel caught the lantern light as she stormed toward the 2 cloaked strangers. Chairs scraped and mugs toppled as she slammed the flat of her blade onto their table, the sound echoing through the tavern. Hands where I can see them, she barked, her voice sharp and commanding. The 2 froze, startled by her speed. Every customer went silent, eyes wide, as the warmth of the tavern vanished, replaced by the heavy tension of imminent violence. The moment Mamma Mia cornered the 2 cloaked figures, a 3rd man hidden among the crowd suddenly bolted for the door. His chair crashed backward, drawing startled gasps. Before anyone could react, Bell Cranel moved his body, blurring faster than he thought possible. In a heartbeat, he slammed into the fleeing man, tackling him to the floor just outside the tavern. The impact echoed through the morning daylight. Seer froze mid-step, eyes wide in shock, while Ryu's hand instinctively reached for her hidden blade. The tavern erupted in murmurs as Bell pinned the man down, breath heavy, realizing even he didn't understand how he'd moved that fast. Half an hour later, the city guards arrived, their armor clattering as they entered the tavern. They swiftly apprehended the 3 cloaked suspects, binding their hands and confiscating 5 glowing red gems that pulsed faintly with a sinister light. The guards thanked Mamma Mia for her quick action before marching the prisoners out into the night. As the commotion died down, Bell lingered near the overturned table. His gaze fell upon a small, overlooked shard of crimson, one of the red gems that had rolled under a chair. Without a word, he slipped it into his pocket, unseen by anyone. After the guards left, Mamma Mia sheathed her sword and gave Belle a firm pat on the shoulder. "Good work, kid," she said gruffly, though there was clear pride in her voice. "Didn't think you had that kind of reflex in you." Belle scratched his cheek, embarrassed. "Just did what felt right." Seer, standing beside him, tilted her head curiously. "But, how did you know, Belle? You moved before anyone else even realized what was happening." Belle hesitated before answering quietly. "I heard whispers, voices crying out from those stones. I didn't know why, just that they sounded like they were suffering." Seer blinked, her gentle smile fading into confusion. "Whispers?" she repeated softly, as if unsure she'd heard him right. "You mean actual voices?" Belle nodded, his expression earnest but uneasy. The air between them grew heavy. Seer's eyes darted briefly toward the spot where the cloaked men had sat, then back to Belle. "That's strange," she murmured, her tone a mix of curiosity and concern. For a moment, she studied him, searching his face for a hint of jest, but found none. Instead, there was only quiet sincerity and a lingering unease. "Whispers from stones," she thought. "Just what are you, Bell Cranel?" The hostess of fertility was quiet again that night. The last chairs had been stacked, the lights dimmed, and the doors locked. Outside, Orario's streets were still under curfew. Tense, uncertain. Inside, however, the air hummed with anticipation. One by one, they arrived. Loki, arms crossed, and smirking despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Ace, silent and observant as ever. Finn, sharp and alert. Hayden Selland and Alan Fromel from Freya Familia, their presence dignified yet heavy. And finally, Einatul, carrying another stack of reports from the guild. Mamma Mia wasted no time. "Before you start," she said, voice gruff, "you'll want to hear what happened earlier." She recounted everything, the cloaked customers, the red stones, and Belle's swift reaction. Ina's brow furrowed deeply as she listened. "Red stones?" she repeated. "Those aren't ordinary gems. They're philosopher's stones." That drew several sharp looks. "The guild has records of them," Ina continued. "But we don't know how they're made or what they are made. Only that they're dangerous. They hold incredible powers if an alchemist used T-charm. Alchemical constructs from a mistress, banned long ago." Loki leaned back, rubbing her chin. "TCH. No wonder they give me the creeps. I saw one once, ages ago. Same feeling, like something inside is alive." Belle hesitated before speaking. "When I was near them, I heard voices. Whispers at first, then screams, like people begging. But when I touched one, everything went quiet. The room fell still." Ace tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes fixed on him. "They stopped. When you touched it?" she asked softly. Belle nodded. "Yeah, it's like they recognized me, or something." Finn steepled his fingers, thinking deeply. "That means the stones respond to spiritual pressure, maybe fauna energy, or something beyond it. If Bell silenced them, he's either resonating with their nature, or suppressing it entirely." Hayden's calm, refined voice followed. "Or perhaps something Bell is just lucky, or something else entirely," he said, his gaze sharp but unreadable. "Either way, such a reaction is not of ordinary origin." Loki's smirk faded. "You're saying my kid here might have done something even gods can't?" No one answered. The only sound was the faint creak of wood and the flicker of lantern light. Ace kept staring at Belle, quiet curiosity in her eyes. He looked down at his hands, uneasy under their weight. Somewhere deep inside, he could still feel the faint warmth of that red stone and the silence it left behind. Einatul unfolded a sealed parchment she acquired from the guild earlier. Her expression darkened as she read. "The interrogation reports came in," she said gravely. "The 3 suspects from earlier. They're confirmed members of the Silent Hand. Each carried concealed alchemical agents and fragments of philosopher's stones." She placed the report on the table, the parchment trembling slightly in her hand. "Their equipment matches a mistress design. Symbols, mixtures, even the tools. They're not just spies. They're alchemists trained for sabotage." A low murmur filled the room. Loki cursed under her breath. Finn's eyes narrowed. The threat was growing clearer. Loki sighed, tapping her fingers on the table. "Finding infiltrators in a city this big's like chasing ghosts. We can't just sniff out alchemists on luck." Her tone was sharp, frustration clear. Finn leaned forward, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "True," he said, "but we have something the guild doesn't." His gaze shifted toward Bell, calm but meaningful. "If he can hear those stones, sense them somehow, that's an advantage we can't ignore." The room grew quiet. Loki's smirk slowly returned. "Heh, guess our little rabbit's got better ears than we thought." Bell looked uneasy but resolute. Hayden Selland leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but cutting through the silence. Has the guild determined the purpose of these stones? He asked, eyes fixed on Inatul. The half-elf hesitated, flipping through her stack of parchments filled with coded notes and reports. No, she admitted, shaking her head. We still don't know the exact use. Every record from Amestris is incomplete or redacted. The only thing certain is that they store incredible alchemical powers, but for what end, we can't confirm. Alan Fromel frowned, arms crossed. Then we're blind, he muttered. Loki sighed. Blind, and up against ghosts with science. Ace finally spoke, her soft voice cutting through the heavy silence. What about the magic circle that drained fauna during the last attack? She asked, her golden eyes steady. Do you think the stones are connected to it? The question lingered in the air for a moment. Finn glanced at Hayden, both men sharing the same thoughtful expression before Finn replied. It's possible, he said carefully. The energy used in those circles felt unnatural. It didn't follow divine or elemental logic. If philosopher's stones hold incredible alchemical powers, perhaps they're being used as batteries to power those circles. Hayden nodded slightly, his voice calm, yet deliberate. Indeed. The process may involve converting the energy of alchemy into something that disrupts fauna. A perversion of alchemy meant to distort divine blessings. But without direct study, we cannot be certain. Ina frowned. If that's true, then every stone could be a fragment of something larger. A network that could cripple the god's protection. Loki leaned back, eyes narrowing. So we've got people making alchemy batteries to kill our magic. That's cheery. The room fell quiet again. Even Bell felt a chill run through him, remembering the faint pulse of the red stone still hidden in his pocket. While the others continued their tense discussion, Bell suddenly stiffened. A faint whisper brushed against his ears, distant yet unmistakable. The same chilling tone. From before, soft but urgent, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. His eyes darted to the window, then to the floor, searching for the source. Wait, he said quietly, raising a hand. His voice was calm, but carried weight. Please, be silent. The room fell still immediately, all eyes on him. For a moment, there was only the faint crackle of the lantern. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time, calling his name. The whisper grew louder, threading through Bell's mind like a warning. His pulse quickened. Without hesitation, he stood, his chair scraping softly against the wooden floor. Ace. Alan, he said firmly, eyes sharp with sudden focus. Both turned toward him in surprise. Something's wrong, Bell continued, his voice low but resolute. I don't know how to explain it, but it's close. Alan's brow furrowed, already reaching for his spear, while Ace gave a silent nod, trusting him without question. Loki started to protest, but the seriousness in Bell's expression silenced her. We'll be back soon, he said, already moving. Bell, Ace, and Alan sprinted through the streets of Oreo, the cool night air slicing past them. Bell led without hesitation, guided by instinct, or perhaps the whisper that still echoed faintly in his mind. Ace and Alan followed close behind, though both exchanged quick glances as they ran. He's fast, Alan muttered, astonished. Didn't they say he doesn't even have a fauna yet? Ace said nothing, but her golden eyes narrowed in quiet curiosity as Bell leapt over debris with almost unnatural grace. Then, ahead, movement. A cloaked figure stumbled through an alley, pursued by monstrous shapes. Under the lamplight, the figure's cloak parted, revealing an Amestris military uniform, deep blue jacket, silver cord, and polished buttons. Bell, Ace, and Alan's eyes narrowed simultaneously as the faint glint of an Oreo badge caught the moonlight. In that instant, they realized the cloaked figure was an adventurer in disguise. Behind him came 3 chimera hounds, grotesque amalgamations of wolves, serpents, and lions, their bodies stitched with dark alchemy. 2 hulking iron-plated soldiers followed, each step shaking the ground. Chimeras, Alan shouted. In an instant, Alan and Ace darted forward, blades flashing as they met the metal soldiers head-on. Bell, without thinking, lunged toward the cloaked man, tackling him aside just as a chimera's jaws snapped where his head had been. Rolling to his feet, Bell drew his short sword, facing the beast. Stay behind me, he yelled, eyes burning with resolve. Bell gritted his teeth, gripping his sword tighter as the 3 chimera hounds circled him. The first beast lunged. Bell parried, barely deflecting its claws. Another came from the side, forcing him to twist away, his footing faltering. Sparks flew as steel met fangs again and again. His arms trembled under the relentless assault, muscles screaming from the strain. He managed to wound one, but the other two pressed harder, driving him back. His breath grew ragged. I can't keep this up, he realized, desperation setting in. Bell swung his sword desperately, blocking one chimera's strike, but the second lunged low, its fangs tearing into his left arm. He cried out, twisting free, blood splattering across the cobblestones. Before he could recover, the third hound's claws raked across his back, the pain searing through him like fire. He staggered, barely managing to stay upright, vision blurring from the assault. Then another bite tore into his right thigh, sending him to one knee. The beast circled, growling, ready to finish him. Bell's grip tightened around his sword, his breath shallow but defiant. He refused to fall. As the three chimera hounds leapt to finish him, the world suddenly froze. The beasts hung motionless midair, droplets of Bell's blood suspended like rubies. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, the scene shattered. The battlefield dissolved into sand, an endless desert beneath an eternal night sky, stars burning brighter than ever. Bell staggered to his feet, gasping. At the horizon stood Nyx, her silhouette draped in starlight and shadow, watching him with calm, knowing eyes. Once again, you stand on the edge, her voice echoed softly. But this time, will you embrace what you truly are? Bell looked around, heart pounding, the vast desert stretching endlessly in every direction. The frozen memory of battle still lingered in his mind. The snarling hounds, the pain, the blood. What? What happened? He gasped, staring at the horizon where Nyx stood, her form shimmering like liquid moonlight. Where am I? Why does this keep happening? Nyx's eyes glowed faintly, her voice calm, yet resonant. You ask what happened, yet the answer lies within you, she said, stepping closer, shadows curling at her feet. Tell me, child of night, why do you still fight me? Why won't you embrace the night? Bell took a step back, sand shifting beneath his boots, confusion and fear twisting in his chest. What are you talking about? He demanded, his voice cracking. Embrace the night? What does that even mean? His gaze darted between the endless stars and her calm, distant face. Every time I close my eyes, I end up here. Why? What's happening to me? Nyx only watched him, her expression unreadable, almost sorrowful. The wind stirred her long, silvery lavender to black hair as she whispered, You already know, even if you deny it. The night has chosen you, Bell Cranel. All that remains is for you to choose it back. Nyx's smile faded, her voice turning soft, almost mournful. You're going to die, Bell Cranel, she whispered, her words cutting through the still air. The alchemists will come. Amestris will burn Oreo to the ground. Your gods will fall, your heroes will scream. And that girl, her tone darkened, dripping like poison, that kind soul who smiles at you every morning. She will be broken down, piece by piece, until her soul becomes a philosopher's stone. Bell's breath hitched, horror freezing his veins. No, he muttered, trembling. Nyx stepped closer, shadows stretching. That is the fate you flee from, child of night. Bell shook his head violently, taking a step back, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. No, you're lying, he stammered. Searshid, never, none of that will happen. Nyx only smiled faintly, her voice soft but laced with cold inevitability. Lies, she echoed. Do you think mortals lie more sweetly than the night itself? Her form glided closer, her gaze sharp as moonlight. I thought you wanted to be a hero, Bell Cranel. A hero for her. Bell's lips trembled. I. Nyx's tone deepened, her words wrapping around him like chains. Or will you run away from your destiny again? Will you let her stand alone while the fire consumes her world? Will you watch her soul shatter her body torn apart to birth a stone that screams for eternity? The air thickened, heavy with dread. Nyx's voice grew almost tender. You hear their cries already, don't you? Those trapped in the stones, begging for release. Her eyes glowed like twin eclipses. You can give them peace, Bell. You can give her salvation. Bell fell to his knees, trembling, her words carving deep into his heart. Tell me, Nyx whispered, will you save her? Or deny her salvation, and let her die screaming? Nyx stepped closer, her shadow stretching across the starlit sand until it enveloped him. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried the weight of eternity. So I ask you once more, Bell Cranel, she whispered, her gaze piercing through him. Will you accept the night? Bell's breath quivered, his hands trembling at his sides. The images of Seer, of Oreo burning, of souls screaming in crimson stones, flashed before his eyes. His fear twisted into resolve, fragile yet unyielding. He swallowed hard, lifting his head to meet her eyes. Yes, he whispered, voice shaking. Yes, I do. At midnight, the heart of Ororio shuddered. A sudden eruption of energy swept through the city, not with sound or light, but with the suffocating weight of divine power, ancient, endless, absolute. The sky turned blacker than night itself, the stars flickering as if in fear. Inside the hostess of fertility, the air thickened. Loki gasped, her usual grin vanishing as an invisible force pressed against her chest, while Ina's eyes darted toward the door, instinct screaming that something vast and terrifying had awakened. Finn and Hayden exchanged grim looks, the realization dawning in their eyes. Mamma Mia froze mid-motion, a plate slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor. Ryu fell to one knee, her breath trembling. What? What is this power? She whispered, pale as frost. Across Oreo, Aurenas rose from his throne, eyes glowing like dying stars. The primordial night. She has awakened. Even distant Ares, seated within his war camp, felt his divinity recoil. And in the Freya Familia manner, Otter, the mightiest warrior of men, clenched his fists, his body trembling. This pressure, he muttered, voice low and uncertain. It feels like the night itself is alive. Ace and Alan Fromel were locked in combat, blades ringing against the iron-plated soldiers, sparks flying in the darkened street. Then, without warning, a crushing wave of energy swept through the air. Both warriors froze mid-strike as the world seemed to still. The metallic soldiers halted too, their glowing cores flickering weakly before dimming entirely. The pressure behind them was suffocating, ancient, like the night itself had descended. Alan's grip tightened on his spear. What is that? He breathed. Ace turned slowly, her golden eyes wide, feeling the overwhelming presence rising just beyond the veil of darkness. The world around Bell trembled as he whispered his acceptance. The moment the words left his lips, a surge of black energy erupted from beneath his feet. Liquid shadows poured over his body like living ink, crawling up his arms, his chest, his face, until they solidified into a dark coat, rippling with the texture of midnight itself. A white skull-like mask, crowned with jagged obsidian thorns, formed over his face, its hollow eyes burning faintly with violet light. His sword screamed as it was consumed by the darkness, stretching, reshaping, its blade lengthening into something sharper, colder, alive. The air around him shattered as power surged outward. The three chimera hounds, mid-pounce, were thrown back violently, their monstrous forms crashing into nearby building walls. Bell stood unmoving, the night swirling around him like a storm. The world had grown silent, save for the whisper of the goddess in his soul. Thank you for listening. I truly appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed this audiobook, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on future content.